My name is Laura. 6 months ago, I married my high school sweetheart, Matt. We've known each other since childhood, so I've always been close to his family, which made the wedding process incredibly smooth. We share many mutual friends, turning our wedding into a joyous celebration filled with well-wishers. I promised to stand by Matt for the rest of our lives. A few months after we got married, I discovered I was pregnant. I was over the moon, and the blessings kept coming. Matt's mom was incredibly supportive, helping us out almost every day. Since we got married, we've been living with Matt's parents. As an only child, Matt was raised with a lot of love and care, so living with his parents after our wedding felt like the natural choice. I had no qualms about it and agreed immediately. From the day after our wedding, I enjoyed doing household chores with my mother-in-law, and we would chat about all sorts of things. When I announced my pregnancy, she cried tears of joy, celebrating as if it were her own good news. Whenever I tried to do anything around the house, she'd say, "Don't worry, Laura, I've got this," and take over. I'd reassure her, "I'm feeling fine today, really," but she'd insist, "You have to think of the baby first. Rest up," and stop me from doing anything. While I appreciated her concern, it reached a point where I was bored out of my mind. I had been working part-time, but I quit my job as soon as I found out I was pregnant, on the advice of both my mother-in-law and Matt. With nothing to do at home, I was going stir-crazy. I feel like moving around a bit. Can I go shopping? Need anything?" I'd ask, hoping for some freedom. But she'd firmly respond, "Absolutely not. You're not even in your second trimester yet. You need to rest," and wouldn't let me leave the house. I understood her concern, but it felt suffocating. She had a miscarriage before having Matt because she continued working, so she was worried I'd face the same fate. "If you're not careful, you'll end up in the hospital like I did," she'd warned me. Not wanting to create tension, I decided to take it easy until my second trimester. Once I reached that milestone, she started allowing me short walks. Matt and I would go out on his days off, buying snacks from a local store and having little picnics. Sometimes I'd go for a walk with my mother-in-law while shopping. She even started cooking with me again. I realized she was just deeply concerned for me during the early stages of my pregnancy. At 38 weeks, my water broke while I was climbing the stairs at home. With Matt and my father-in-law at work, my mother-in-law quickly drove me to the hospital. Matt had already coordinated everything with the hospital, so by the time our baby Brian was born, he was right there with us. Matt was the first to hold Brian. "Oh, he's so adorable," he said, his eyes welling up with tears as he lovingly gazed at our newborn. Seeing him so emotional made me tear up too. "Thank you, Laura. I'm so happy right now," Matt said, smiling at me, and I couldn't help but cry. "May I come in?" My mother-in-law, who had kindly stepped out of the room, peeked her head in. "Go ahead and hold him, Mom. He's really cute," Matt said, handing Brian over to her. I felt a bit awkward. My mother-in-law had been incredibly supportive and was eagerly awaiting her grandchild. What would she say now that Brian was here? The thought made me anxious. "Thanks to you, we were able to have Brian safely. Thank you so much," I said to her, grateful for all her support. But her response was unexpected. "He doesn't look like him." "What?" I asked, unsure if I heard her correctly. "What do you mean? He doesn't look like Matt. Are you sure he's Matt's child?" What was she talking about? This should have been a happy moment, but my heart started racing uncontrollably. "What are you saying?" Matt immediately confronted her, but she continued without apologizing. "Look at Matt's baby pictures. Brian doesn't resemble him at all," she said, showing us a baby picture of Matt on her phone. "Well, they don't have to look exactly alike," I started to say, but before I could finish, she stormed out of the room, exclaiming, "I can't deal with a child whose parentage is in question." "Hey, Mom," Matt said, following her out and leaving me alone. I looked at Brian's face and started to cry. He looked so much like Matt, especially around the eyes and ears. Matt never returned to the room and only texted me to say he was going home with his mom. I was stunned by his behavior but too exhausted to confront him. A few days later, on the day of my discharge, Matt came to pick me up but seemed distant. "What's wrong? We get to live together starting today," I said, trying to lift the mood, but he didn't seem happy. "Mom's still upset. Try not to provoke her," he said. I had just given birth and was mentally and physically drained. Why did I have to be considerate of her on the day I was discharged? I didn't say anything and the ride home was silent. The tension didn't ease even after we got home. As soon as I walked in, my mother-in-law greeted me with sarcasm, saying, "Oh, you're back. My father-in-law avoided eye contact, and my mother-in-law continued with snide remarks. I've told you many times, this child is Matt's. His name is Brian. Won't you please love him? I pleaded, but she ignored me completely. Say something, Matt, I cried out, but he responded coldly, it's true. He doesn't look like me. At that moment, my tears dried up. Matt, who should have supported me, had abandoned me. Looking back, I wish Matt had stood up to his mother, but instead, he sided with her. I felt hollow and resigned myself to the idea that my mother-in-law might never love Brian. Matt wasn't helping with childcare either, which only added to my stress. Can you feed him formula while I take a shower? I asked. Matt replied, I've been working all day. Why should I lose sleep over a child who might not even be mine? I couldn't believe this was happening. Never mind, I said, feeding Brian the formula myself and quickly taking a shower once he fell asleep. This had become my life. If it had only been my mother-in-law, I might have considered getting a DNA test to prove her wrong. But even Matt wasn't convinced Brian was his. That hurt more than anything. My parents had moved to the countryside soon after I got married, so I couldn't rely on them for support. They had been thrilled about my marriage and had welcomed Matt as if he were their own child, which made it impossible for me to confide in them. After months of this, my mother-in-law, who had been avoiding me, finally spoke up. Laura, can you bring the baby to the living room? All right, I replied. My mother-in-law had been ignoring both me and Brian, and I thought she might finally apologize. But my expectations were quickly dashed when I arrived in the living room and found both her and Matt sitting there. Could you please leave with that child? She demanded. What? I was stunned and at a loss for words. She glanced at Brian and continued, he still doesn't look like him. I've had enough. Matt remained silent. At that moment, I couldn't take it anymore. Fine, if that's how you feel, I'll pack my things and leave, I said, grabbing the divorce papers and starting to pack. Matt said nothing and continued his conversation with his mother. Make sure you pay child support, she said. How can we when we're not even sure he's Matt's? My mother-in-law shot back. I was seething with anger. Without saying another word, I left and went to my parents' house. I explained everything to them, and though they were initially confused, they welcomed me with open arms. I decided to stay with them while I looked for a job and saved some money. I had requested child support from my ex-husband through a lawyer, but the payments never came through. I was determined to cut ties with my ex and his family, so I chose not to press the issue of the unpaid support. Years passed, and Brian was about 6 years old when I received a call from a local friend who also knew Matt, informing me that Matt had died in a car accident. Although I heard about it soon after it happened, I chose not to get involved. Brian was in a busy, active phase, and we didn't attend the funeral. A month later, while catching up with local friends and returning to my hometown for the first time in years, I decided to buy a gift before heading to my friend's house. So Ryan and I went to a department store we used to visit as a family. Laura, I turned around to see my mother-in-law, whom I hadn't seen in years. I stood there, stunned, as she quickly approached us and said, You're Brian, right? And began talking to him. Brian, I'm your grandma. You really look just like Matt, she said. I couldn't tolerate hearing that. Enough is enough. Because of you. Wait, I started, but she cut me off. Don't be so angry. I've wanted to see you for so long. Feeling my frustration rising, I said, Excuse us, and pulled Brian away, leaving the scene. Was that Grandma, Brian asked. I had kept his grandmother's identity a secret until now, but Brian, now in elementary school, was genuinely curious and kept asking, Is it Grandma supposed to be your mom? Who was that lady? I couldn't avoid it any longer, so I explained it to him in simple terms. When we got home, Brian looked up at me and said, Mama, you've been through a lot, huh? As he patted my head. His kindness made tears well up in my eyes. I felt deeply grateful for having him in my life. A month later, my mother-in-law showed up at the apartment where Brian and I were living. How did you find us? I asked, surprised. She replied, I asked around through Matt and our mutual friends. I finally tracked you down and pushed her way inside. Please leave, I said firmly. She responded, Matt died in an accident, and my husband passed away from illness. You two are all the family I have left. Brian came out of the next room, likely drawn by my mother-in-law's loud voice. Spotting him, she said, Brian, why don't you come live with Grandma? I have a bigger house and can give you lots of delicious food. Stop it, I said as my mother-in-law pulled out a thick envelope. It contains $50,000 for child support. You two are all the family I have left, so please come live with me, she said, pushing the envelope toward me. Then she turned to Brian with a smile and said, Brian, Grandma wants you to come live with her. I'll buy you anything you want, okay? In that moment, I felt overwhelmed and on the verge of tears. I was torn between questioning why now and wondering if I should deny Brian the chance to have another grandmother. I was at a loss for words. Then Brian spoke up. I'm not going. My mother-in-law let out a confused sound at Brian's words. Brian, what are you saying? You can live with Grandma. There'll be lots of delicious food, and I'll buy you toys, she said, trying desperately to persuade him. I don't want to. You were mean to Mama, right? My only grandma is Mommy's mom, Brian said, pulling away from her and sitting down beside me. My mother-in-law fell silent, her expression reflecting a sense of defeat. After staring at us for a moment, she abruptly stood up and left the house without another word. We haven't heard from her since that day, and she never visited us again. The child support money she left behind remains untouched, saved for Brian's future. When I consulted my parents about whether to return the money, they said, you never received child support before, so it's fine to keep it. Taking their advice, I decided to keep it. I hadn't heard anything about my mother-in-law since then, but honestly, it no longer matters to me. I have Brian, who is so strong and steadfast by my side. Even at his young age, Brian protected me from his grandmother's advances and chose me over her tempting offers. I love him with all my heart and am committed to raising him responsibly. I want to ensure his happiness, even without a father, now and forever. /
By the end of the work shift, Jeff was already out of sorts. Routine work all day long. Patterns, details, a picky foreman, colleagues who didn't shine with intelligence. His mother's words echoed in his mind. Study, son, then you can choose a good profession and go to work in a suit and tie. These educational moments were always interrupted by his father's loud comments. Sarah, why are you talking nonsense? Suit, tie, glossy shoes? You want our son to grow up to be a soft-handed man? Not while I'm alive. He'll follow in my footsteps. Working men are always needed. With a worthwhile trade in his hands, a real man will always earn a piece of meat. And meat for a man is his food and his strength. Remember what your daddy said, son. Now, standing under a hot shower in the locker room, Jeff dreamily imagined how Bonnie would serve him a plate of hearty soup with a big piece of meat at home, followed by a second course, meat again, with plenty of side dishes. His wife was an excellent cook and never disappointed him. He'd lucked out marrying a woman with a real chef's diploma, and the fact that he wouldn't let her work in her profession, well, there was no point wasting her culinary talent when he alone could eat everything. Jeff arrived home in good spirits. The enticing aroma of Bonnie's specialty cutlets wafted through the apartment, lifting his mood further. After washing his hands thoroughly, Jeff decided to play the role of strict father and called 10-year-old Amelie and 7-year-old Billy to the hall to listen to their report on school progress. He examined his eldest daughter's diary, full of A's and B's, asked about the drawing in his son's album, and upon learning it was a horse in a meadow, laughed heartily. You'll never be Thomas Cole, that's clear enough, but no matter, don't get too excited. You'll work at Daddy's factory. Not everyone becomes an artist. Your mother and I once went to an exhibition. I'll tell you this, a scribble is a scribble. It's not a real occupation, just idle hands at work. Now run along, our mother's calling for dinner. Jeff sat at the kitchen table without asking if the others had eaten. He gazed at Bonnie with satisfaction, deciding that tonight he might favour her, fulfil his sacred male duty. That's how he always referred to intimacy with his wife, believing he was doing her an honour. Unaware of his thoughts, Bonnie went about her usual routine at the cooker. She removed his empty bowl of soup, set before her husband a pan of steaming cutlets, arranged mashed potatoes on a clean plate, and moved a bowl of salad. Surveying the table, the head of the family began calculating something in his mind. What's all this? We were at the market together on Saturday. Meat's getting more expensive by the day, yet here we have beef soup, cutlets with potatoes and out-of-season fresh vegetables. Am I supposed to work myself to death at the factory just to feed all my freeloaders with such extravagance? It's late fall, and instead of affordable sauerkraut, you've got fresh farm vegetables and greenery in the fridge. What am I to you? A working ox to plough endlessly, waiting for your next paycheck? Do you do nothing yourself, growing fat only? The children do nothing but study. There's only one breadwinner in this family, so remember that from now on. Starting tomorrow, meat is only for me. The children will make do with porridge, and you'll manage fine with cheap seasonal vegetables. Your cabbage stew is perfectly good. Add a couple of sausages instead of meat, and that'll do nicely. So from now on, no market any more. I will buy everything we need myself. Bonnie stopped in her tracks. The facade of her happy marriage finally collapsed before her eyes. She silently removed her apron, covered the pan of cutlets and the pot of soup with their lids, and left the kitchen. Her patience had snapped instantly, finally, and irrevocably. 12 strange years of marriage. For the sake of the children, she could raise them herself. Why had she even stepped into this family maelstrom? She had been such a pretty girl. All the boys in high school had pursued her, inviting her to movies and offering ice cream at cafes, but she always hurried home to her mother, who was already ill then. Having given birth late in life, raised a child alone, and worked 2 jobs, had taken its toll. After classes in culinary school, Bonnie would rush home with fear, dreading that one day she'd unlock the door to find her mother breathless. In the end, her mother passed quietly in her sleep. Bonnie found her in the morning, wearing a peaceful smile, something that made it even more devastating. The grief was overwhelming, and soon Bonnie had been driven into marriage by profound loneliness. While practicing in the canteen, after her mother's death, she began smiling at a confident, brave guy, older than her, who came for lunch. "Oh, you're an appetizing girl. I could eat you up instead of a bun." Bonnie hadn't recognized such remarks as inappropriate, having no experience with men. His courtship was loud, his conquest swift. After just a couple of walks beneath the romantic moon and stars, he imposed to visit her for a cup of coffee. The next morning, as Bonnie served Jeff breakfast in her apartment, he praised her. "You're special, Bonnie, in every way. I never expected to be your first. Look at me carefully. We might have something here. I wouldn't turn down such a fine woman." Within months, Bonnie was pregnant. Jeff played the gentleman, bringing his girlfriend to the registry office, all proper and formal. They had a modest wedding. They settled in Bonnie's inherited apartment, where Jeff immediately declared himself head of the household. Their family life followed the old patriarchal ways. Bonnie knew little about proper marital relations. She genuinely believed that this was normal married life. The epiphany came later. She would walk in the courtyard, first with Amelie, then with Billy. Other young mothers glowed with happiness, pushing strollers near the playground, checking their watches expectantly. Soon enough their husbands would appear, bearing flowers, cakes, or other signs of affection. Jeff dismissed such gestures as foolish. He would condescendingly buy ice cream for the family in the park, strutting beside them. "Look how generous I am. I'll even buy movie tickets." He truly believed these weekend outings were enough for happiness. "Yearly seaside vacations? Don't joke," he'd say. In his opinion, one coastal trip with his young wife was sufficient. The children could go themselves once they grew up and started earning. It was enough that he fed them, clothed them, bought necessary books and toys. Some might find Jeff's character terrible, but this was precisely who he was. It started when his own father would shut the refrigerator in his mother's face, saying, "Eat what you earn. Jeff can boil himself a wiener, but don't you dare touch my meat stew." Young Jeff initially felt troubled by his father's outbursts, secretly sharing half his wiener or cutlet with his silent poor mum, or offering her bites of his chocolate. Then something shifted within him. Why share with his mother? She wasn't starving. She managed on pasta, porridge, bread and water. It wasn't quite a bad diet. Women don't need meat at all. They don't physically work like that. The boy used to repeat his father's words in his mind. Bonnie was well acquainted with her colourless, quiet mother-in-law. The elderly woman attributed her gloominess to the hardships of widowhood. She spent her days at home, never going to the mall, movies or park. Her only entertainment was chatting with neighbours on a bench and walking to the pharmacy and grocery store. Bonnie hadn't delved much into such matters initially. She saw her mother-in-law as stiff, silent and uncommunicative, attributing it all to personality. Only later did she realise she herself was inexorably sliding toward the same bleak state. Without change, she would become equally battered. Then one day, to her horror, she recognised she had never truly loved her husband. Jeff's rudeness and greed were unbearable. Thus, she learned to avoid marital duty cleverly by feeding him until he was too full to want anything else from her. She would bring snacks to him while he watched TV in the evenings. Then she would slip into the bedroom once he dozed off. Jeff would snore on the sofa until morning in front of the dark TV screen. He reminded her of an overfed bull being readied for Christmas. It was nearly repulsive, yet Bonnie didn't know how to break this twisted knot. The woman greeted her husband mechanically after work, immediately seating him at the table and hurrying to feed him his fill, making sure to have dinner with the children before he arrived. Thoughts of divorce grew more frequent. Though scared of managing alone with the children, even her lack of work experience didn't worry her. With her profession, she could feed herself and her children. Bonnie realised how Jeff had made her normal thoughts about food seem abnormal. Loving meant cooking with care for loved ones, choosing the best ingredients with pleasure. What of this division of people into those worthy of meat and the useless lackeys who shouldn't be fed it? Such a fascinating categorization, either a philosophical doctrine or psychological delusion. Clearly no Nobel Prize awaited this discovery about dividing society into first, second and third classes. Jeff and his father had invented this nonsense out of terrible greed. Bonnie shook her head with determination. She would divorce her useless husband and buy a new life with Amelie and Billy. While the children prepared for bed, Jeff fell asleep as usual after a hearty dinner, his snores filling the living room. Bonnie didn't want to wake him for explanations. Everything could wait until morning. While the house slept peacefully, she packed his things. It was her apartment. She let him move in with his mother. By 6 in the morning, 3 heavy suitcases stood in the hallway. Bonnie checked the closet one last time. If she'd forgotten anything, Jeff could collect it later. Her aversion to her husband peaked at that moment. She couldn't bear another minute with him. Jeff woke up smugly, ready to criticise Bonnie for overfeeding him the previous evening, causing him to fall asleep before his marital duty. Then he noticed the suspicious suitcases by the door. "Going somewhere, Bonnie? What's this about?" Bonnie entered the living room, sat in the armchair, and gathered her thoughts to speak clearly. "These are your things, Jeff. Everything I've managed to pack. I'm filing for divorce, today." Jeff was genuinely shocked by his wife's behaviour. She's lost her mind, getting too bold. Must have woken up on the wrong side of the bed, he thought, determined to teach her sense immediately. Not wanting to delay the lesson, Jeff grabbed a kitchen towel from the ironing board. He swung to strike Bonnie's face, intent on putting her in her place before she got too defiant. Bonnie merely smiled faintly. She had crossed the Rubicon and was ready to burn the remaining bridges. Without scenes, fights or scandals. Jeff's blood ran cold when he heard her voice. She had never spoken to him like that before. I never noticed, Jeff, that you have trouble hearing. Did you misunderstand my words? You will leave this house with your belongings right now. I'll even wrap up some food for you, so you won't go hungry on the way. Jeff suddenly went limp. He clearly realised that Bonnie was not joking. She was kicking him out in earnest. He hadn't expected such a turn from his usually docile wife. He was confused, unsure how to behave or what to do next. Seeing him surrender, Bonnie smirked. It won't be difficult for me to put your suitcases outside without your help. I'll handle things with the children. And don't let your shadow darken this doorway again. It's over between us, definitively and irrevocably. I won't live another day with a man like you. I'm done. Jeff had no fight left in him. Gone was his desire to command her in his usual gruff voice. Before him stood a stranger, a woman he no longer recognised. Unable to predict what she might do next, he retreated from this battlefield without waiting for a more dramatic finale. He quietly carried the suitcases one by one into the entryway, accepted the lunch bundle from his wife's hands, and absently sniffed it. The package smelled enticingly of Bonnie's signature cutlets. Jeff wanted to pinch himself. Surely this was just his worst nightmare. The illusion shattered with a thunderous slam as Bonnie shut the door behind him. Jeff's mother, sitting on a bench near the entrance of her house, couldn't believe her eyes. Her son Jeff stormed through their yard with his suitcase, red as a tomato and seething with anger, as if scorched by the summer sun. He marched up to his mother and immediately began berating her. "Still sitting here with nothing to do? Let's go home. I'm hungry after my shift." The woman, long accustomed to avoiding unnecessary questions, scurried ahead of her son. She quietly opened the apartment door and hurried to the kitchen. Though the refrigerator was nearly empty, she could make pasta. Seeing the finished dish, Jeff's face reddened further. "Mother, you have a grown man sitting here." "I live on my pension, Jeff. How can I afford delicacies? I've always tried not to burden you, never asked for help. Even after working at the factory my whole life, the state didn't give me much for my old age. But don't worry, I manage. Everyone has such a pension nowadays." Jeff couldn't stand his mother's chatter. An empty pasta, even without cheese, irritated him even more. He hadn't eaten such awful food since kindergarten. Now he had to adjust to this bewildering new life. Let Bonnie cool down. He'd find a way to get her back in his possession. Meanwhile, Bonnie savoured her freedom. She quietly pulled some meat from the soup, added it to the pasta, and fed her little family. She kept reflecting to herself. The air in the apartment seemed fresher, and the children hadn't even asked where their father had gone. With his departure, everyone felt happier, more peaceful, more serene. Even fate seemed to be on Bonnie's side. Whilst searching online for a pie recipe, she stumbled upon an interesting advertisement. A new seaside hotel was hiring staff. They offered shift work with housing provided. The vacancies included cooks, waiters, and kitchen workers. A note mentioned that the hotel also accommodated preschool children, with a separate camp organised for them. Bonnie completed the online application without any hesitation, silently grateful for her interest in computers during her studying. Though Jeff had disapproved of her hobby, he had eventually bought her a friend's old, worn-out laptop after she convinced him she'd use it to find new recipes for him. As luck would have it, she didn't need to visit any employment agencies. 2 days ago, Bonnie received an email invitation for an interview. The branch office of this major coastal hotel chain was located in a modern business centre. How far Bonnie was from such a business-like beauty. However, she opened the door to the office confidently, and with equal confidence, she answered all the questions of an employee from personnel services. After listening to Bonnie, The woman fell silent for a moment before delivering her verdict. You have no practical work experience, which is a significant disadvantage, but we're willing to try you as a kitchen worker. You'll work under the cook's supervision, and we'll see how it goes. Your children can stay with you in our staff dormitory. We'll provide you with a separate room. Expenses for their accommodation will be deducted from your wages, but you'll still earn enough. Your shift starts May 25th, and the season ends September 25th. Bonnie flew home as if on wings, eager to tell her children the wonderful news. They had never seen the sea before. 4 months on the south coast. It was like a fairy tale. She didn't spare a thought for Jeff, his ultimatum, or her recent discoveries about him. She erased her husband from her life with a single stroke of her mental pen. She stepped into her new life with cheer and confidence. The hotel on the shore of the gentle sea exceeded all expectations Bonnie and her children had of paradise. Brand new and preparing to welcome its first tourists, it was magnificent. White stone buildings cascaded down to the beach amid subtropical greenery. Mature palm trees stood like exotic sentinels along the alleys. Secluded gazebos nestled in the thick vegetation on the slopes. Guests would arrive in a week to be served by 5 restaurants and bars. Bonnie was assigned to the vegetable preparation area. Despite the kitchen's abundance of modern appliances, vegetables were still peeled and washed the traditional way. Only afterward were they precisely cut with sharp knives and choppers. Large potatoes, long red carrots, pungent onions and round beets in shades from fuchsia to Bordeaux, soaked in large containers, cleaning off garden soil. Bonnie wasn't afraid of hard work. Though her eyes were fearful, her hands were capable. The kitchen team was competent, with no time for idle chat, only time to keep moving. A shuttle bus took everyone to the dormitory in the evenings. The children would be waiting for Bonnie there. Their small but cosy room was filled with peace and warm conversation. Despite their exhaustion, the whole trio would head straight to the sea. It was too cold for swimming. The waves rolled majestically to shore, just as they had for centuries, and the children were enchanted by the salty waters, walking until sunset before dinner. Thank goodness, the dormitory food was excellent. Bonnie wouldn't have had the energy to cook for the children here too. On opening day, from the restaurant windows, they watched a stream of cars bringing vacationers onto the property. Agile young men efficiently carried luggage to the buildings, while a well-dressed, cheerful crowd chatted animatedly at reception. Adjusting her headscarf, Bonnie was hurrying to accounting with paperwork when she noticed an unusual sight. There were 3 of them, a man in his 40s and 2 elderly people. She knew instinctively they were his parents. A charming elderly woman in a lace-trimmed silk dress, and her husband in light-coloured shorts, a palm tree printed shirt and a Panama hat. Though they made quite a picture, their son seemed completely at ease. He served his parents cool water with orange slices from the lounge bar, and then adjusted his mother's glasses and kissed her cheek. He rushed to handle their reservation. Bonnie felt a twinge of envy. Her own mother was no longer alive. However, smiling at the touching scene, she hurried to complete her task. She soon forgot about the devoted trio. The next day, the same caring son entered the kitchen through the back door. He was looking for the manager, who had gone to meet suppliers. The chef came out instead to speak with him, and he made his request. My mother turns 80 in 3 days. This trip is my gift to her and my father. I'd like to order a special, unique cake from you. I've detailed everything here, including the ingredients needed. The chef unfolded the paper, read it slowly, moving her lips silently, then handed it back. That's impossible. 1 cake with such a combination, meringue and soufflé, jelly, fondant, caramel, praline, marzipan, various types of biscuits, 3 kinds of cream, 2 glazes and exotic syrups for soaking. How do you know so much about confectionery? Are you a restaurateur? Actually, I'm an inventor and scientist, but my mother is a master confectioner. Though she only practiced her art at home, she spent her career as a cook on my father's team. I've been fortunate to enjoy her creations all my life. Now, I'd like her to receive a special cake as a surprise for her anniversary." The chef smiled. "You think too highly of our restaurant service. Such a masterpiece is beyond us. There are hundreds of tourists vacationing in the hotel right now. Your order is too unique for us to break away from our tasks and devote time to it. Besides, we don't have a pastry chef of that caliber on our staff." Later, Bonnie couldn't explain why she, an unwitting witness to this conversation, stepped forward and asked to see the recipe. After all, she had only opened the back door for this man when he knocked. Where did this boldness come from? But when Bonnie read the description of the cake, she somehow knew she could handle it. Not even the chef's saucer-wide eyes embarrassed her. Her boss merely shook her head and said, "We'll relieve you of your other work for 24 hours. Everything else is now your responsibility. One more thing. Purchase the ingredients yourself, if you're so ambitious. Our service won't have time to deal with all that." The man, who had been listening attentively, immediately brightened. "I have my car here. I'll take you to all the necessary stores myself whenever it's convenient. There's not much time left before the anniversary, and my parents can manage without me for now. I've had them together for over 50 years. My father is an archaeologist. My ancestors were all on expeditions. I was born after they had already settled at home." He trailed off mid-sentence, looking at Bonnie inquisitively, while she gazed questioningly at her chief. Sighing heavily, the boss concluded, "All right, Bonnie, I'll give you another half a day tomorrow for grocery shopping. I'm curious myself whether such a cake is possible outside of confectionery fantasies. Go for it." At 8 o'clock the next morning, Bonnie and her unusual client were driving down a winding mountain road to a large local supermarket for cake ingredients. After about 10 minutes of silence, the man extended his hand and introduced himself. "I'm Malcolm, and you're Bonnie, right? I was thinking we should try the southern local market instead. Something tells me the butter, milk and fruit there will be more natural and higher quality. We have plenty of time. Let's go for a little walk." Bonnie flinched involuntarily, which didn't escape Malcolm's notice. "Did I say something wrong?" She smiled softly. No, it's fine. It's just that, because of circumstances, I don't like markets, or even that word." Malcolm regarded her with curiosity. "Tell me why. We have quite a bit of time during our drive. I promise whatever you tell me will stay between us." Bonnie hesitated. Telling a stranger about her troubles seemed unthinkable, but she was so tired of suffering alone in this cauldron of mental anguish, so worn down by adult loneliness. These weren't things she could explain to her children. So unexpectedly, watching the mountain scenery flicker past the window, she found herself telling everything to her companion, who proved to be an incredible listener. After her story, Malcolm remained silent for a long while, lost in his own thoughts, before finally speaking. She could only listen and try to remember his words. "I'm very lonely too, Bonnie. Alone in my personal life. My wife left me when she learned I couldn't have children because of radiation exposure. I'm a nuclear physicist working in a classified facility. I don't regret anything. I live by the principle of who else but me." Then Bonnie interrupted him. "And I try to survive, raising my children in difficult conditions. But when I come home from work, 2 sons embrace me, and all my sadness vanishes like magic." "Oh, I'm sorry, Malcolm. Forgive me. I didn't mean to hurt you with my words. A woman with her children always has light in her window, even in troubled times. That's all I meant." Malcolm couldn't understand why he felt compelled to be so open with her. This lovely woman awakened an unfamiliar warmth in him. He wanted to protect her, to shield her from all hardship, to stay by her side. He'd never felt such things, even for his wife. How had Bonnie so quickly found the key to his heart? After sharing their life stories, both realised they felt remarkably comfortable together. Bonnie calmly visited the market she usually avoided, selecting the finest ingredients for the cake. Meanwhile, Malcolm bought her a luxurious bouquet of roses. He earned well and hadn't spent money on a woman in ages, having only pampered his elderly parents. On their way back to the hotel, they stopped first at her dormitory. Bonnie wanted to put the roses in a vase to keep them fresh. She invited Malcolm to see how she and her children had settled in, and his heart ached again. The small room was somehow both homely and cosy, simple yet charming. He suddenly longed for Bonnie to welcome him home from work, to check his daily accomplishments, to serve him dinner, with or without meat. It didn't matter. At the hotel, they encountered Malcolm's parents walking along the shady alley. He quickly put his finger to his lips before introducing his companion, hinting that the cake remained a surprise. His mother gave him a subtle wink. His father discreetly raised his thumb. Malcolm's mood soared even higher. He handed his parents a bag of strawberries to take to their room, then carried the heavy bags into the kitchen with Bonnie. The anniversary was only 2 days away. Bonnie had poured her heart into what was clearly becoming a confectionery masterpiece. She had always loved the dessert classes most at culinary school. Malcolm visited the kitchen several times during her work, always with the same message. "Bonnie, do it however you think best. I trust you completely." Bonnie shooed him from the kitchen, insisting she would handle it herself and that outsiders weren't allowed. But Malcolm persisted. On his third visit at the end of her workday, he had a question. "I'll take you home to the dormitory. My parents are going to a live music concert at the hotel tonight. Perhaps we could all go along with your children. Go out and get ice cream?" But Bonnie, exhausted from working on the cake, had to decline. "Malcolm, let's save the treats for another day. I've been on my feet all day and I'm tired. I can't even take the children to the sea today." Malcolm was disappointed but didn't make a fuss. This woman was steadily claiming more space in his heart. For the first time, Malcolm couldn't enjoy his parents' rapturous appreciation of the saxophone. His thoughts dwelled only on Bonnie. He was amazed how she occupied his mind, appearing before him in light blue jeans and a light-coloured checkered shirt, making it impossible to focus on anything else. He tossed and turned all night, waiting for morning, when he and his parents would go to the restaurant for breakfast. They planned to present the cake at lunch. The waitresses had decorated the hall with balloons that Malcolm and Bonnie had bought the day before. The birthday girl arrived in full splendour, looking charming in her elegant summer dress, wide-brimmed hat and delicate sandals. Her eyes sparkled with warmth and joy. Everyone in the hall could see this was a woman who had lived a life filled with love. While her husband and son attended to her, Bonnie wheeled out her confectionery creation. Even a novice could tell this was a cake crafted with extraordinary imagination. On a beautiful platter stood a mound of ancient Scythian treasures. Chests filled with edible gold and silver, precious stones, helmets and chocolate spears. Above it all stood a sorceress in a soft pink caramel dress, holding a ladle. Flirtatious, graceful, lovely. Everyone immediately understood this composition represented the celebrant. The elderly woman burst into tears. "Darling, you created this miracle yourself. It's a jewel of confectionery. I could never make something like this." She gave Bonnie a heartfelt embrace. "Now, my friends, let's not waste time. The speeches can wait. Let's taste this cake. I've always had such a sweet tooth." While everyone in the hall shared pieces of Bonnie's sweet creation, she tried to slip quietly into the back rooms. Malcolm caught her at the last moment. "Bonnie, thank you so much. This is absolutely divine. I brought 3 pieces for you and the children. I'm sorry I couldn't get more." Bonnie turned, tears in her eyes. "My husband would have eaten all 3 pieces himself, Malcolm. He wouldn't have thought of me or the children. I never knew men could be like you, so thoughtful and generous." She sighed and disappeared into the kitchen. Malcolm knew this wasn't the moment to follow her, to speak, to offer comfort. He had another week at the hotel, and he would dedicate it to this poor woman. He would show her that the right man strives to make his woman happy, not take from her. And soon it all happened. They grew close quickly, disregarding their guilty consciences and conventional morality. Before meeting him, Bonnie hadn't known love could be so consuming, that she could lose herself so completely in another person, experiencing this otherworldly feeling of mutual need. She had never imagined a man could cherish a woman with words that flowed like sweet streams from his soul. On her day off, after the cake triumph, she invited Malcolm to her dormitory while the children were at the park. She embraced him as soon as the door closed. He didn't resist, didn't question, didn't judge. It was their pure happiness. Malcolm then fell into a deep sleep, and Bonnie lay staring at the ceiling. She remembered her mother. Already seriously ill, her mother had once called Bonnie to her bedside for a heart-to-heart talk. "Daughter, it's clear that soon you'll be alone. I'm not going to make it, but somehow I know you won't repeat my bitter loneliness without a man, won't spend the rest of your life moping around, wetting your pillow with tears. Don't think I'm teaching you anything wrong. When you meet your man, test your feelings through physical love. I'm not talking about sin, but something else. If you feel drawn to embrace him, if he reaches out to you too, don't hesitate. Let tenderness guide you." Now Bonnie felt infinitely sorry that her first experience had been with Jeff. With Malcolm, everything was different. She had known she wanted to be with him from the moment she accepted his bouquet of roses, while they worked on the cake for his mother, when she invited him to the dormitory today. In earthly love, shame falls silent. The need to be loved comes first. Bonnie didn't even dwell on the fact that they only had 6 days left. Then Malcolm and his parents would leave, and she would return to her closet with unpeeled vegetables. Cinderella would be left without her beloved prince. She would have to live on memories of their love. Such was her fate, in her mind, and she agreed to that. Meanwhile, Jeff was restless. As he pondered about all the situation, realization struck him. Fine, let Bonnie go to the market. Let her buy whatever food she wants. Let everyone in the house eat meat. He'd agreed to work tirelessly for them, but Bonnie must return to the stall of their family. He hadn't realized she was such a stubborn creature, and the most strange was that she vanished. He had visited her apartment twice already. No one there. It seemed impossible. She couldn't have disappeared into thin air with the children. After a few more days of hesitation, Jeff used the keys to their shared apartment. Fortunately, she hadn't thought to take them from him. The man was going to investigate. There must be some clue to where his wife was hiding. He entered the apartment with trepidation. It was clean and empty. Only a laptop sat on the table, and Jeff had an idea. Perhaps he'd find her traces there. Jeff himself was clueless about computers. He only knew how to use the TV and refrigerator, but there was a computer enthusiast at his work. He'd help with this task. His colleague quickly examined the laptop. Bonnie hadn't set any passwords, and immediately found her recent searches and correspondence. Even slow-witted Jeff understood immediately. His rebellious wife had secured a job at a new seaside resort hotel, and he would soon be on vacation. He'd surprise her and the kids. He had every right to go to the sea. At that moment, Bonnie was giving Malcolm a final embrace. His parents tactfully stepped aside, pretending to get water for the journey, while she could barely breathe against him. Her tears had dried up. She steeled herself, whispering internally, "Don't show anything. Don't upset him. It's over. Not all dreams come true. You can handle this. You'll manage." Malcolm studied her face for a moment and asked, "Why do you keep moving your lips, as if holding back words? Have you convinced yourself, silly girl, that I'm leaving you for good?" Bonnie nodded silently. Malcolm pulled her close again and whispered in her ear, "I just need to settle things at work. I have so much accumulated vacation time that I can spend the whole summer with you by the sea, but I have much bigger plans. I don't want to be with you only in the summer. I want to fall asleep and wake up with you every day on the same pillow. You'll come with me. I have a house in the academic town, and I want you to be its mistress. While I'm away, please start the divorce proceedings. Why wait? I don't want the woman I love to remain married to a stranger. And please talk gently with the children about how they'd feel about me becoming their father. I want to take you far from this town. I've already told my parents I want to marry you. They're overjoyed that you have children. They'll have grandchildren to dote on." Time inexorably counted down. The final minutes. Long farewells, long tears. That's how people describe separations. Yet these two loving hearts shed no tears. There was only a slight sadness, trembling within their great happiness. They felt grateful for everything they had shared and were full of hope for their future together. Bonnie watched as the car headed north. It was her day off, but the woman decided to head to the kitchen immediately rather than wait for tomorrow. Work would help distract her from her thoughts and rainbow-coloured plans. Within minutes, Bonnie transformed into her usual self, a quiet woman with bright eyes, methodically cleaning potatoes. By 8 o'clock, Bonnie felt exhausted but satisfied, conveying her impressive stock of cleaned vegetables. They could catch the last service bus back to the hotel, where light already glowed invitingly from their room window. The children must be home, probably watching TV instead of sleeping. Climbing the metal ladder quickly, Bonnie opened the door and froze. At the table sat Jeff, chewing on a pie and sipping coffee from a large mug. He turned at the sound and sneered. "Here comes my wifey home. Had your fun at last? Come in, darling. Tell me what you've been up to. Leaving your legitimate husband?" "What are you doing here?" Bonnie demanded. "Ran out of meat at the market back home." Jeff lunged at her with unexpected agility, like a grizzly bear, his breath hot on her face. "I'm a legitimate guest at your hotel. I booked a room. I've been watching you for a day. You were too distracted to notice. Saw you carrying on with some man. Shameless. But I'll forgive your lover and your games. Let's go to my room. Time to work on baby number 3. You like children, don't you, wife? Ready to wait me up from work? Cook meal for your dear husband?" Bonnie was overwhelmed. How had he found her? How had he gotten here? Jeff seemed to read her thoughts. "Your laptop gave you away and people helped me figure it out. Just showed my passport at reception. Said I wanted to surprise my wife because our wedding anniversary is in 3 days. The managers were quite helpful." Bonnie's mind raced as she desperately sought a way to escape, to drive her husband away. He became increasingly insistent, but Bonnie refused his advances. Disgusted, she gathered all her strength and pushed her husband away, threatening to call the guards if he didn't leave her room immediately. Jeff glared at her, but obeyed, leaving with a parting threat that he would continue pursuing her until she realized she was his destiny. Alone now, Bonnie tried calling Malcolm, but his phone was out of range. She felt helpless, too drained even to cry. She couldn't tell if Malcolm's silence was mere unfortunate timing or if he had deliberately cut her from his life. The next morning, Bonnie filed for divorce electronically. She would never again submit to Jeff's will. Meanwhile, Malcolm was deeply troubled. A major scientific experiment was scheduled at work in the coming weeks, and his presence was essential. His colleagues depended on him completely. For the first time, his devotion to work created conflict. His heart was torn between love and duty, unable to abandon either his colleagues at this crucial moment or Bonnie. He called to explain his delay, but she responded with cool detachment, as if she had expected this. When he tried to explain the emergency, she cut the conversation short, promising to call back later to discuss everything. She never did, not that day nor the next. Finally, Malcolm had no choice but to immerse himself in his scientific project. Working day and night, he would return home so exhausted that he would only collapse into bed and fall into deep sleep. The week with Jeff felt like imprisonment for Bonnie, though she had one small mercy. He no longer attempted to get close to her. He occupied himself with the children, went to the sea and slept in his own room. To outsiders, they appeared like a normal family, celebrating their wedding anniversary. On their anniversary day, he bought her a bouquet of daisies and got home the next day. Bonnie tried not to dwell on Malcolm's silence. He had his beloved physics now. Hadn't he himself joked about being married to protons and neutrons? What had she expected? That he would abandon everything for their love? It seemed unrealistic, even absurd. Though she missed him terribly, she refused to call him. If they were meant to be together, it would happen. Until then, she would wait and just work. A week after Jeff's departure, Bonnie's career took an unexpected turn. Another cake order arrived, remarkably similar to her first success. An enthusiastic mother wanted to organise a children's party at the hotel, bubbling with creative ideas. She envisioned an elaborate cake shaped like a red car, accompanied by various pastries, cupcakes, muffins, cookies, and specialty desserts. She insisted on only the finest, most exclusive treats for her child's table, regardless of cost. "We can't dedicate that much time to your order. The hotel is at capacity, and we're barely managing our buffet duties. Though we have bakeries at our resort, we're short-staffed during peak hours," the manager explained, but paused when the chef whispered something. "However, we do have one exceptional staff member. I've been considering moving them to the pastry department." The customer's eyes lit up. "We'll meet all your conditions. When can we speak with this pastry chef?" They summoned Bonnie immediately, and she agreed to help the devoted mother realise her vision. The children's party was magical, complete with exciting entertainment, treats, a big red car, cakes, and everything else on the list. When the customer discovered that Bonnie's children were staying at the hotel, she immediately included them in the party, and after celebration, she handed Bonnie a thick envelope. "My son was happy today, thanks to you. I sincerely wish that everything works out the way you want it to. You are wonderful." To Malcolm, the airplane seemed to crawl like a turtle through the sky. He counted down not hours but minutes until he would see his beloved. At the hotel, however, devastating news awaited him. Bonnie had broken her contract a month before its end. He frantically searched the hotel for any information about her, going mad with despair. He cursed physics and all its scientific mysteries. Just as he was about to fly to Bonnie's hometown to search for her, a woman from the computer game room beckoned him over. "I can't watch you suffer like this. I helped Bonnie submit her electronic divorce petition. Her husband showed up here. I don't know what happened between them, but Bonnie wasn't herself while he was here. She left suddenly, without explanation. I have a copy of the divorce petition with her address. If you care about her, go find her. She's a good person. I know you'll be happy together." Bonnie was cooking dumplings when the doorbell rang unexpectedly. As she walked to open it, she wondered who it could be. She had already dealt with Jeff by presenting him with the divorce petition and threatening legal action if he ever bothered her again. Jeff had retreated like a coward, throwing one last bitter remark. "Do you think you're a princess? But who needs you with 2 children? Who would take on such a burden? I'm not your helper anymore, and just so you know, anyone will be happy to marry me because I am a man. And that's it. You lost your last chance." When Bonnie opened the door, she stepped back in shock. There stood her Malcolm, holding a large bouquet of roses and several packages. "How did you find me?" Bonnie wanted to shout down the hallway, but her lips barely moved from the rush of emotions. He stepped forward and embraced her tightly. "Why did you run away? I nearly lost my mind when I couldn't find you at the hotel." Bonnie, refusing to hide her feelings, looked straight into his eyes and explained. "My husband came to see me, and I feared he would always hover over me. When you didn't respond, I thought this was all self-deception, that you really didn't need me. You had your physics at home, maybe even another woman. I thought I was just a vacation romance to you." Malcolm smiled. "What made you think you should make such decisions for both of us? Let me just call my parents to tell them I found you safely. Then we can eat. I'm starving. Do you have an extra plate and fork for me? I bought plenty of groceries." Bonnie suddenly remembered the dumplings on the stove and rushed to the kitchen, hearing Malcolm talking to his parents. "Mum, don't worry. Everything's fine. I found her. Tell Dad the good news. When are we coming? As soon as Bonnie's packed. We haven't decided what she wants to bring yet." Malcolm's voice trailed off, and Bonnie turned around. There he stood in the kitchen doorway. Her man. Her love. She saw such adoration in his eyes that her knees weakened. They moved toward each other, once again lost in their magical connection. Bonnie might have contemplated the happiness awaiting her, but one thought crossed her mind. How fortunate it was that Jeff's selfishness with food had inadvertently led her to true happiness. This is how a fasting diet can sometimes lead to a bright future rather than mere sadness. Sharon tasted the newly cooked soup, wrinkled her nose, and irritably threw the spoon into the sink. "Too salty, and the taste is all wrong, sweetish like some vegetable compote." The over-salted, sweet-smelling soup, which might only appeal to someone fond of Asian cuisine, was just another mark in today's absurdly frustrating day. Things had gone downhill from the very start. She'd woken suddenly at 6:30 a.m., despite having 3 more hours to sleep, particularly annoying on her first day of vacation. After suffering until dawn, she finally dragged herself out of bed, feeling far from refreshed, dropped a cream bottle in the bathroom, broke a fingernail, and, as the crowning achievement, burned an ugly hole in her perfectly wearable blouse. Looking at the melted, wrinkled fabric, Sharon questioned herself. Why had she needed to iron this blouse right now? There was no answer, yet the ruined garment, one of the few that truly suited her, was proof of her folly. She'd tried to make peace with the universe by cooking soup, which Denny always called her culinary masterpiece. But instead of its usual rich, noble taste, she'd produced this sweetly salty disaster. Sharon finally accepted that today was definitely not her day. Such days, when nothing worked and everything went wrong, had become frighteningly frequent lately. It was time to face the truth. It was about state of mind and her mood, which were far from normal. For days now, she had thought of nothing but her husband and her place in his life, if she still had one at all. Though Sharon had no concrete evidence for her doubts, she sensed that proof wouldn't be long in coming. Why beat around the bush? Denny is cheating on me, I'm certain of it. We've been together for 10 years, and I always thought our relationship was genuine and strong. I loved him, worried about him, cared for him, tried to be a good wife. Just look at my cooking journey. I spent years injuring my fingers, nearly cutting off my pinky while carving a chicken, burned myself countless times, cursed humanity's need to eat daily, wasted mountains on food, and repeatedly clogged the kitchen drain. But I persevered. From someone who mangled potatoes rather than peeled them, I became an excellent cook. I'll never forget Denny saying, "Sharon, this is a masterpiece, better than Mum's stew." These past 10 years held so much, good and bad, sad and funny. We were truly together through it all. Wasn't I there when his best friend since childhood, practically his brother, died, and Denny was so shocked he couldn't even button his shirt? Or when he quarrelled with his foolish boss, quit on the spot, and suddenly found himself unemployed with a mortgage to pay. Did I reproach him? No, I understood and supported him, though I privately wished he could have been less principled and more tactful when needed. And what about his complete inability to handle household repairs? Did I ever reproach him for that? I could have, especially given my kitchen triumphs. Denny was genuinely hopeless at home maintenance, though he eagerly attempted everything, fixing appliances, clearing drains, mounting shelves. After several mishaps that left our home master with minor injuries, I decided we'd simply call professionals when needed. Denny was precious to me, just as he was. And how could I forget his devotion when I slipped on spring ice and broke my leg? The care and love he showed me, stuffing me with fruit, seafood, nuts and supplements after learning about my tendency toward fractures. Then there was that painful memory in Sharon's mind, their dreams of children, or even just one child. Everyone around them had children, but for her and Denny this remained elusive. "Are you going to leave me now?" she asked, looking away. "Why should I?" he wondered. "Or have you found a suitable excuse to get rid of me?" "Stop it, I'm serious. Why would you want to tie yourself to a barren woman like me?" Sharon grinned bitterly. "I don't even know. I'll have to think about it." Denny looked at his wife very seriously. "I should make a list of your shortcomings and merits, and see which weighs more." "Oh, well, it's already made." He took a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket and studied it carefully. "Well, it's a lot of faults for one man, but you know what outweighs everything? I love you. And the baby? Well, there are many other ways, aren't there? We'll get ready and try. At the very least, we'll adopt." How she loved him at that moment. Then there was that unforgettable day when they bought an enormous, expensive sofa, only to realise after delivery that this monstrous masterpiece of furniture craft wouldn't fit through their entryway door. Denny refused to return it, declaring it a matter of honour. Either he would conquer the sofa, or the sofa would conquer him. They spent the evening sitting on their purchase outside the entrance, embracing, while bewildered passers-by and neighbours watched them wait for some miracle worker who could disassemble it without damage. It became one of the best evenings of their lives, followed by one of their best nights. Their first New Year's Eve as husband and wife was another magical night. Driving to the friend's country house, they got completely lost in snow-covered village alleys, finally stalling in a snowdrift minutes before midnight. They passed champagne between them, drinking from the bottle, eating tangerines and gazing into each other's eyes. Soft snowflakes descended silently, settling on Denny's hair and shoulders, glistening on his brow. Their tangerine and wine-scented breath mingled in the frosty air. It was the most enchanting night of Sharon's life. How many such precious moments lie stored in Sharon's memory, distant yet unforgotten. Though truth be told, Denny isn't exactly the easiest husband. His quirks would have sent another woman running long ago. Take his obsession with fishing and hunting. Why would a modern, prosperous man be drawn to such primitive pursuits? What drives him to regularly escape to the wilderness, sitting for days in mud and water, catching colds and developing calluses. And the money spent on these hobbies, the spinning rods, lures, and endless equipment. She discovered just how expensive his passion was when she decided to buy him a genuine leather hunting bag for his birthday. The purchase not only consumed her entire gift budget, but depleted her shoe fund too. Though Denny later solved that problem by buying her the shoes, the cost of hunting gear continued to astound her. But the worst began when Denny's hunting or fishing trips were successful, and he returned home with his spoils. Horrible, dirty, unbearably stinking bags lay on the hallway floor, and the washing machine hummed, trying to cope with impossibly dirty clothes. She began to feel like a caveman's wife, smelling of wet feathers, with fish scales stuck to her feet. After all the torment, patience, and heroic struggle with fish and game, a plate of duck pâté or fried pieces of wild meat would be proudly placed on the table. "Sharon, try it, please," said the hunter, looking at her with transparent, rapturous eyes. Sharon, completely intolerant of the game, opened her mouth to refuse, but looking at her favourite man, his eyes full of pride and childlike hope, she suddenly felt as if she were about to offend a child. The tasting always ended with her expressions of delight, and his assurances that he would bring more next time. She could only be grateful they didn't live in Africa, where Denny might bring home part of an elephant carcass as a trophy. Though, to be honest, she wasn't exactly easy to live with either. Denny could probably say a thing or two about her passion for orchids. She adored these beautiful flowers, which reminded her of miniature elf and fairy faces. Sharon's home collection contained more than 40 orchids, and Denny courageously tolerated this arrangement. Whenever he bumped into yet another pot that had suddenly appeared before him, he would freeze in terror. The almost weightless, unstable orchid pots were surprisingly easy to overturn, and Denny clearly didn't want to risk his life and family harmony by knocking some rare cattleya off the windowsill, especially since these falls always left traces of soil that he could never successfully hide. But who really minds orchids? They stand quietly and peacefully in their places, frightening no one. The same couldn't be said about her dear husband's other hobby, his obsession with hockey. That was something truly difficult to endure. Just imagine this well-mannered, polite, intelligent man, who normally maintained perfect self-control, would, several times a year, transform into a screaming, jumping, curse and blessing, spewing madman. In their first year together, Sharon barely survived until the end of the World Hockey Championship. Though Denny watched it on television, he shouted as if their apartment contained the entire crowded stadium. "Denny, how often do they play the World Cup?" Sharon asked cautiously. "Every year," Denny replied, rubbing his hands together. But, as they say, if you can't beat it, join it. And Sharon made a strategic decision to become part of hockey, or rather a fan. She prepared thoroughly, reading several articles and studying the national team's roster before resolutely sitting down one evening beside her nervously fidgeting husband. "Listen, where's he going? Look at number 5. He's a defenceman, but he's moving to the left, forward position," she suddenly declared in an authoritative tone, eyeing her raging spouse with an expert's look. "Now he'll interfere. If we play like this against the Swedes, what chance do we have?" Denny froze. Even if a flying saucer had landed right then and a greenish humanoid had emerged waving a webbed paw, he couldn't have looked more astonished. "You think so?" he managed to squeeze out. "Of course," Sharon declared authoritatively. "There are simply no other options. Why mess with what works? Don't you agree?" Denny nodded respectfully, smiled uncertainly, and carefully slid the cup of chips toward her. A few days later they were both jumping on the couch and yelling like crazy people. Sharon had become just like Denny, freaking out, counting down to the final siren, cursing at the referee's mistakes and consuming so much junk food during matches that the next day she'd anxiously calculate how many hours of squats it would take to burn off all those calories. Despite finding herself unwillingly drawn into the frenzy of hockey, Sharon managed to exact her revenge. "Sharon, I am shocked," he exclaimed upon seeing yet another dark, handsome Eastern prince on the television screen. "You are an intelligent person. How can you possibly watch this nonsense?" Sharon had a deep affection for Turkish soap operas. They had utterly captivated her. "So what?" Sharon retorted, defending her idols. "It's not nonsense, it's life." "Oh, really?" Denny sarcastically responded, sitting down next to her and looking at the screen. "Life? Let's see, who is this, for example?" "That's the main heroine. She's a poor girl. Her mother is forcing her to marry a rich man she doesn't love. But she loves a poor man just like herself. They've been friends since childhood, and now she's sitting at home alone and miserable," Sharon eagerly explained. "Poor? Sitting at home? Of course, in a 3-story villa with a pool. You know, I wouldn't mind being poor like that. And what's that around her neck? Sharon, if she sold that rock, she could live comfortably for the rest of her life without needing any husband, rich or poor." Denny laughed. "Oh, I can't take this seriously. Sharon, how can you watch this?" "Fool," Sharon muttered under her breath, stubbornly fixating her gaze on the television. Yet despite his initial disdain, Denny frequently became an unwilling witness to these Turkish dramas set against the backdrop of the Turkish seas, and gradually found himself drawn into this world. One day, Sharon invited 2 of her childhood friends over. They sat in the kitchen, enjoying cake and chatting about everything under the sun. Naturally, the conversation turned to their favourite soap operas. "Oh, girls," one of them sighed dreamily. "While I was home with the flu, I watched Endless Love. It was so interesting. My favourite, Burak Özçivit, was in it, looking so handsome with his beard. He's just perfect." "What are you talking about, Cassandra?" Denny suddenly interjected, entering the kitchen to open another bottle of wine for the ladies. "That's not Burak Özçivit, that's Burak Deniz. He's the one with the curly hair who stars in all those silly shows for teenage girls. Burak Özçivit is a serious actor, with respectable films like The Magnificent Century and Osman. And there's that other one, Sharon, the one with your favourite plot about rich Nihat and poor Kemal." The women sitting in the kitchen collectively sighed in admiration, while Denny, cursing his loose tongue, blushed deeply and hurriedly left the room. And so they lived. Sharon cheered for the national hockey team, ate game meat and bony riverfish, and cooked soups. Denny battled household repairs, secretly watched Turkish dramas, dodged suddenly appearing orchids, and enjoyed Sharon's cooking. Sharon gazed at a photograph hanging on the wall in a frame. The photo captured a moment when neither she nor Denny knew they were being photographed. Denny was embracing her with both arms, kissing her neck, while she, half turned towards the camera, was laughing. It was clear that these two were happy and content with each other. Sharon's gaze shifted from the photograph to a small sheet of graph paper. This sheet, folded several times, had fallen out of Denny's pocket the day before, unnoticed by him in the dim light of the hallway. On the paper, written in Denny's hand, were dates and names. It didn't take a brilliant analyst to figure out that this was some sort of schedule for the next few days. For example, tomorrow, Tuesday, there's something scheduled called G. Judging by the context, that must be the gym. Thursday, P. On Friday, there's an art exhibition at the art gallery. Oh, that's even written without abbreviations. It must be a critical event. But I wonder, since when has he become so interested in painting? Next to each date was the capital letter D, and next to the gym, pool and gallery was the letter T. Obviously, these were the initials of names. D must be Diana, and T is probably Tracy? Poor thing, he even has to write down the women's names to keep track. Sharon crumpled the unfortunate piece of paper in her fist and then angrily tossed it away. The crumpled ball of paper hit the floor with a soft thud and rolled slightly to the side. Sharon couldn't hold back any longer. She buried her face in her hands and cried bitterly. But then, catching herself, she resolutely wiped her face and stared angrily out the window. Sharon was born into a family of doctors. Her parents worked in the city hospital performing surgeries, working round-the-clock shifts, conducting consultations. It was a mystery how they maintained their cheerfulness, given their workload. Sharon adored her parents, though when any adults asked, "Sharon, when you grow up, will you become a doctor like your mum and dad?" her immediate and firm response was always, "No, of course not." "But why?" "Because I want to see my children more than once a week," Sharon would retort, effectively ending any further discussion on the topic. Since childhood, she was rather lazy, content to go with the flow, dabbling in one thing after another and studying just enough to avoid scolding. After graduation, she enrolled in a pedagogical college, solely because her father secured a targeted admission for her. Serenity was Sharon's primary life goal. "Sharon, you should have been born a couch cushion," her close friend Cassandra would laugh. "You'd just lie there on your side, not thinking about anything." Once, with a large and boisterous group of friends, they spontaneously decided to go to the sea. Just a couple of hours on the plane, and there it was, vast, beautiful, gentle, and warm. That evening, Sharon declined to join her friends for dinner at a restaurant. For some reason, she wanted to be alone, to stroll along the nearly deserted and unusually quiet beach after 9. She slowly walked along the very edge of the water, where the sand, recently covered by a retreating wave, was wet and pleasantly cooled her feet. She held onto her hat, just in case. Of course, the accessory was chic, but honestly very impractical. The wide brim billowed like sails, and at the slightest breeze, the hat tried to fly away. Several times Sharon had already chased the runaway hat across the beach, naturally looking ridiculous and weird. Suddenly she felt something explode in her head, and seawater rushed into her ears and mouth. Confused and disoriented, she tried to scream, but only swallowed more water. Sharon might have become the first vacationer in history to drown in shallow water, but fortunately that didn't happen. The next moment she felt strong arms beneath her, pulling her up towards the air. She desperately clung to one of those saving arms and suddenly heard a soft, pleading voice. "Miss, please let go. You're digging your nails into my arm. It hurts." She fearfully released her grip and looked at the speaker. Immediately, everything became even worse than before. He might not have been the actor from her favourite Turkish series, but he was undeniably handsome. He had chiselled features, light hair, possibly bleached by the sun, grey, slightly squinted eyes and very tanned skin that made his white smile stand out even more. His broad shoulders and fluid, powerful movements made him almost perfect. "Excuse me, where are you taking me? I mean, us. What's happening?" she finally asked. The man, probably in his early 30s, looked down at her with a strange expression. "Where? To a medical station, of course. You have half a bottle sticking out of your leg," he rasped. Sharon elegantly brushed the wet, sandy strands of hair from her face, looked at her leg, strangely wrapped in her own scarf, and nearly fainted. A large shard of thick bottle glass was indeed embedded in her foot, and it showed no signs of coming out on its own. "Don't you feel anything at all?" he asked in surprise. "No, it must be shock," she authoritatively declared, being the daughter of doctors, and finally lost consciousness. She woke up on a couch, and unfortunately, Instead of the face of the beach macho, a funny red head with a dishevelled beard loomed over her. "What happened to me? Where am I?" Sharon asked nonsensically. "You're in the hospital," the man patiently explained. "You have a foot injury, so I'm afraid your active vacation is over. But don't worry, your knight will return soon and help you." "My what?" she asked fearfully. "Knight, the guy who brought you here. He's a real hero. I tell you, first, it's a good 3 kilometres from here to the shore. Second, it's good he didn't pull out the glass. You would have bled out. Besides, here he is." Her saviour was dressed in white shorts and a light checked shirt, with sunglasses perched on his nose, looking even more handsome than Sharon remembered. Now he was truly comparable to her idols from Turkish melodramas. Sharon awkwardly sat up and carefully lowered her feet to the floor. Her tightly bandaged leg throbbed, and a sharp pain shot through it as it touched the surface. "Ouch!" she cried out, looking pitifully at the doctor. "Does it hurt?" She heard the familiar soft voice and turned to look at the man. He stood before her, smiling as if seeing her dishevelled with smeared mascara was the greatest joy of his life. Denny turned out to be a resident. His family had a small house near the sea, where he lived with his mother. He visited Sharon every day, bringing flowers, oranges, ice cream, and driving her along the coast in an old rattling car. He was always eager to carry her in his arms. They would stop at small cafes with tables facing the sea, sit under striped awnings, and enjoy incredibly delicious pastries. "Denny, I want to lose weight on this vacation," she lamented, taking another bite of the delicious local cuisine. "Nonsense! You look wonderful. You don't need to lose weight at all," Denny smiled, offering her a scoop of ice cream. They would sit side by side on the shore, listening to the sea, feeling that the world around them had changed forever. "Sharon, I love you and want you to be my wife," Denny declared after a week of knowing her. "What? Are you crazy? We've known each other for 7 days. No, you're definitely insane," she exclaimed, as shocked and stunned as when she fell into the sea. "Not 7, almost 8. And it doesn't matter if we've known each other for 8 days, months or years." He smiled. "But I can't stay here with you. I have to go home. I have a job, a contract," she cried, feeling both helpless and joyful. She thought this strange, incredible, unbelievable situation would simply resolve itself because Denny would say, "Well, if you can't, you can't. Bye." Instead, he was silent for a long time, then stubbornly shook his head and said, "If you can't stay, then I'll come with you. I can't live without you. So, will you marry me?" "Are you crazy? Leave here? Leave the sea, the sun, for our land of snow and mosquitoes? No, you're definitely crazy, and I'm just as crazy as you are." "Of course. I agree," Sharon replied. To Sharon's amazement, Denny actually moved to her hometown. Somehow, within a few days, he charmed all her friends and relatives, gaining their full support and her parents' blessing. "What a wonderful man!" exclaimed Cassandra, a woman quite sceptical about men, considering them only suitable for procreation. "Just amazing! What did he see in you?" Cassandra suddenly declared. "What do you mean?" Sharon was offended. "In the direct sense," Cassandra replied frankly. "Sharon, you two are entirely different. You're lazy and indecisive. Oh, don't pretend to be offended. Who else will tell you the truth? And he's like a spring, a perpetual motion machine. Come on, Sharon, get off the couch, or you won't keep up with him." Sharon thought long and hard about her friend's words. Undoubtedly, Cassandra was right. She and Denny were very different, and the longer they lived together, the more noticeable the difference became. She was lazy. There was no denying it. This laziness manifested not only in her lifestyle, but also in her thoughts. Problems that arose in her life she preferred to solve in a simple and universal way. She stopped thinking about them, at least for a while. Denny was the opposite. It seemed that for Denny there were no problems that could seriously challenge him. He simply set a task and solved it in the shortest possible time, so quickly that Sharon sometimes didn't even have an opportunity to fully grasp the task itself. Denny was a programmer of some kind of software specialist, an IT guy, as they say, and finding a job was no problem for him. Just a couple of days after his final move, he was getting ready to go somewhere, sipping coffee from a huge mug. "And where are you going?" Sharon asked in surprise. In her mind, someone who had so radically changed their lives needed at least 6 months just to get their bearings, adjust to the new environment, and consider their options. "Where am I going?" Denny asked, surprised. "To work, of course. I may be a young husband, but I have no intention of living off my wife. By the way, I bumped my elbow on the corner 3 times while shaving. Sharon, your bathroom is impossibly small, and so is the whole apartment. Let's expand." "Right now?" she asked, frightened. The apartment had been inherited from her grandmother and was indeed very small. "There's nothing complicated or terrible about it. The main thing is to start. I've already calculated and planned everything. Look, we sell this mini apartment." He chuckled. "I have about the same amount in cash. We take out a loan to cover the rest, and we buy a normal, spacious 3-bedroom apartment. So don't plan anything for Sunday. We're going to look at options." "What options?" Sharon asked, even more frightened. "Apartment options, Sharon," Denny nodded. "Why do we need a 3-bedroom apartment?" she continued, afraid. "Denny, that's a lot of money. And what do we need 3 rooms for? It would take all day just to dust them." "Honey, we won't always be just the 2 of us. I intend to seriously consider expanding our family. Sharon, we're going to have children. And as for the money, don't worry about it. Don't worry about anything. Everything will be fine." He did everything so quickly and decisively, whether it was getting married, moving to a new city, buying an apartment, getting a loan, or finding a job. Within a month, they moved into a large, bright apartment with a huge balcony. It was harder to get used to Denny's pace of life, which Sharon found abnormal. Her friend Cassandra's predictions were coming true. She was indeed tired with keeping up with her husband. He always needed to do something, go somewhere, or meet someone. And he wanted to do all of this with her. "Sharon, I'm going to the gym this evening. Are you coming?" Denny said before leaving for work this morning. "No, I'm not going today," Sharon said with a tensed smile. "Are you sure?" he asked, looking at his wife and sighing. "Absolutely." She smiled even wider, while her thoughts raced. "I wonder what would happen if I said I was going. Would he have to cancel his meeting with Dee? What a nerve. And he's so sure I won't go to the club. Well, I'll show him. I'll go, but not the way he thinks. And I'll see what kind of sport my dear husband is really into. Why is he so obsessed with that gym? Why do people hate themselves so much that they're willing to torture their muscles and ligaments with iron machines?" Sharon understood the need for physical activity and recognised the role of sports in people's lives. However, she was terrified of gyms, mainly because of the people who looked like they had been going there for years. Everyone was incredibly thin, slim and muscular, making Sharon and people like her feel like representatives of a poor, backward, dead-end branch of evolution. So later that day, Sharon got to the sports complex where she and Denny had memberships. Trying to blend into the background, she hid behind a huge lady who pedalled merrily. Denny entered the gym, worked out diligently, sweated on the treadmill, and disappeared into the locker room. Neither Dee nor T ever appeared, and Denny showed no interest in any of the ladies present. On Thursday she dragged herself to the pool, where it was Denny's next training session. Well, today someone will definitely be there, because he didn't even call me to go with him, she thought resentfully. Denny was already there, swimming laps in the pool, his broad shoulders and white cap periodically visible as Sharon cautiously kept her distance. A couple of times she thought Denny was looking in her direction, and she quickly ducked under water, her heart pounding. Yet all her efforts were in vain. He didn't meet anyone. Doesn't mean anything, Sharon thought stubbornly. No normal woman wants a date at the pool. But the art gallery, that's a different story. Sharon, will you come with me to the gallery on Friday? Denny suddenly asked later that evening. Why should I? She raised her eyebrows in surprise. Why? I told you, Tom has an exhibition. You remember my buddy, don't you? I told you about him. We met about 15 years ago when he came to paint seascapes. He didn't have a penny, so he lived with us, and as payment, he painted my mum's portrait. Great guy. So, he has a solo exhibition. What an art connoisseur! Tom asked him to come. A very convenient excuse to sneak out of the house, Sharon thought to herself, but said, No, darling, I feel bad. Probably ate something not fresh. Have a nice time. The exhibition was unexpectedly crowded. It turned out that Tom had indeed become a decent artist. Otherwise, how else could one explain the numerous groups of people standing in front of the paintings, looking at them meaningfully, nodding their heads, and speaking softly to each other? Yes, he has become much stronger in composition, certainly. And the colour palette, have you noticed? Amazingly well crafted. And what precise control of tone. The popularity of the artist turned out to be Sharon's advantage. At least she managed to hide among the exhibition visitors, while keeping an eye on her broad-shouldered husband in his perfectly fitting suit. And something went wrong again. Women constantly appeared near Denny, and many of them were very attractive. He smiled, talked, even kissed a couple of ladies' hands, but all this was not suspicious at all. Finally he hugged someone, but the object of his affection was not some beautiful woman, but a tall, bald man with a long nose. It turned out to be the exhibition's host, Tom, with whom Denny had been friends for many years. So, what if he hasn't met any women? It means nothing. Anyway, it's better to leave now so as not to run into him. You shouldn't have refused to go to the exhibition, Sharon, he said when he got home. It was a very decent event. Tom, it turns out, is already a well-renowned artist. That's probably why they served delicious canapés at the buffet. So you missed a lot. You know, though, he suddenly tensed up and spoke ingratiatingly, unbuttoning his shirt suspiciously quickly. I missed you so much. In general, the next half an hour, Sharon was not up to suspicions. But they came to life again as soon as Denny brought up the subject of vacation. They had been arguing about it for days. Denny was trying to persuade Sharon to go to the sea, but for some reason she refused. You know, Sharon, I'm going to fly out, Denny suddenly announced. I haven't seen my mum in a long time. I miss her. And besides, I'm really sorry to waste my vacation on staying in town. Well, go ahead, Sharon muttered. Of course, that's it. Why meet with his D or T whenever, risking being seen by someone they know, when he can fly away for a whole week and enjoy himself to the fullest? Now everything makes sense. Everything. Denny soon flew away, and Sharon stayed behind. Denny's mother, Mrs. Barber, still lived in the seaside town. Over the years, Sharon and Denny had, of course, visited her several times. Sharon had developed a wonderful relationship with her mother-in-law, quite unlike the typical portrayal of such interactions. Mrs. Barber was a cheerful, lively woman who had worked all her life as a music teacher. Oh, I'm so glad that Denny finally has a beloved girlfriend, she declared after a few minutes of getting to know Sharon. I must admit I was starting to worry that I would never live to see this day." "Why?" Sharon asked in amazement. "Because my son is already 28 years old, and he has never introduced me to anyone." Mrs. Barber laughed. "Can you imagine, Sharon?" "Honestly, no, I can't imagine." Sharon shook her head. "He is so handsome, strong, smart. Women must have fought for him." "They were," Mrs. Barber laughed again. "But Denny always brushed them off, saying, 'Mum, this is not it at all.' I was honestly starting to worry. And then finally there's you, Sharon. It seems he was waiting for you all these years." It was clear that even if the stories about monstrous mother-in-laws were true, Mrs. Barber was not one of them. She had no intention of fighting with her son's chosen one, teaching her about life, or claiming to be anything more than just his mother. Even after it became clear that there would be no grandchildren in the foreseeable future, she found the strength to genuinely support her unfortunate daughter-in-law. "Well, Sharon," she said, "I won't hide the fact that this is sorrowful for all of us. But we will still hope, right? Don't you dare give up, and don't surrender." She even knocked her fist on the table in emphasis. "Don't you think it would be better for Denny to break up with me?" Sharon suddenly asked. Without losing her composure for a second, Mrs. Barber looked at her seriously. "Maybe, but I know one thing. My son loves you very much. Sharon, he is happy with you. I know it, and I see it. And what you have already given him is more important to him than what you cannot give him yet." After a night of remembering conversations with her mother-in-law and wrestling with tormenting suspicions, Sharon dialed her number. "Sharon, dear, how wonderful to hear from you. We haven't seen each other in so long. Why didn't you come with Denny?" "Oh, I couldn't make it. I have so many things to do. And besides, do you know where Denny is? His phone isn't answering for some reason." "Oh, he's been acting strangely this time. He's always going somewhere, running around. We haven't even had a proper conversation since he arrived. And he kept talking about some critical meeting. He bought a new suit yesterday, a white shirt. It's like he didn't come to the seaside, but to some symposium." "Your beloved son didn't come to a symposium, but to a date," Sharon almost blurted out. "Of course, I will ask him to call you right away. Are you sure you're okay, Sharon? You sound sad," Mrs. Barber said, clearly worried. "Finally noticed," Sharon thought. "If only I could tell you, dear mother-in-law." "But I will see him in the evening only," Mrs. Barber continued. "He warned me that he would be late. His friend is opening a new restaurant on the promenade, and when he found out that Denny had arrived, he came begging for help. You know our Denny. Who could he ever refuse to help? Denny spends whole days there, installing some computer programs for them. It's called the Evening Breeze. Denny thinks it will become the best place in town. Oh, I've kept you listening to my endless talking for so long. Sharon, I just haven't seen you in so long. I will definitely tell Denny that you are worried. Well, take care, dear. Kisses. Bye." The mother-in-law hung up unexpectedly, and Sharon looked at her phone doubtfully. Denny had clearly inherited his restless, active and curious nature from his mother, and now, without asking almost any questions, Sharon knew where Denny was spending his vacation evenings, and she would see for herself whom he intended to spend his nights with. A day later she stepped off the plane in the familiar seaside town. It was easy for her to find the address of the restaurant that Mrs. Barber had mentioned. What should I do now? The woman wondered. I'll go there, see Denny with some D, T, or another letter of the alphabet, and then what? What will that change? She asked and immediately answered herself. At least I'll look him straight in his smug face, maybe even spit, and then I'll leave. Just like that. Sharon looked determinedly at her watch and walked towards the bus stop. A small, nimble bus took her almost to the very promenade. As soon as she stepped out of the stuffy cabin, she immediately smelled the sea, and her eyes delightedly caught the turquoise sparkle of the sea surface. Of course, the evening breeze. What else would you call a restaurant here? She thought involuntarily. A large fenced-off platform led almost to the shoreline, resembling a small pier. It was clear that minor works and finishing touches were being done everywhere, completing a major renovation. But on the terrace, light tables, chairs and armchairs, as well as pots with tropical plants, were already arranged in a mix. The edges of a huge white canopy and white tablecloths, as well as wide palm leaves, were gently rustled by a barely perceptible breeze. "Would you like to have dinner?" a soft, gentle voice asked. "But aren't you open yet?" Sharon asked in surprise. "Yes, we're already starting working." The guy nodded. "I'm a waiter. You see, our official opening is indeed in a few days, but we are already serving our guests and learning their preferences, trying to consider and correct any shortcomings. So, would you like something to eat?" Suddenly, Sharon felt incredibly hungry. Her stomach rumbled, and she looked at the guy in fright. Had he heard? Probably yes, because he smiled slightly and made an inviting gesture towards the terrace. Sharon quickly ran her fingers through her hair, awkwardly tugged at her wrinkled dress, and stepped forward. The table was secluded slightly to the side in a small alcove, and even behind some displayed plants. Denny was nowhere to be seen. In fact, after a few minutes she forgot why she was there. A plate of baked fish and vegetables was placed in front of her. It was so delicious that the process of eating the tender, juicy white meat completely absorbed all of Sharon's senses and mind. "My dear young lady, the fish knife is a little to the left, this wider one, and what you're holding is for butter. It's blunt and won't help you at all," a familiar voice said above her. Sharon started and dropped the wrong knife from her hand. Denny, incredibly handsome, in a light suit that looked especially good with his tanned skin, with casually tousled hair, a smile, was looking at her. "And I'm here because," she managed to say, realizing that she had never felt like such a fool in her life as she did at that moment. "You were supposed to be here today," Denny suddenly said. "Why?" she asked in surprise. "Sharon, don't you recognize this place?" Denny suddenly asked. "What place, this one?" She looked around. "This restaurant, it was just built. How can I recognize it?" she asked in surprise. "What does the restaurant have to do with it?" Denny waved his hand. "I mean, the place. Come on, look around." She looked around carefully. "Well, what can you recognize? The shore is the same everywhere. Sand and water." "Oh, Sharon, you are surprisingly unromantic," Denny laughed. "Okay, I won't torture you. You wouldn't figure it out until morning. Look, this is the very place where we first met. You were floundering, pretending to be a sea nymph, and I, like a young sea god, was saving you from the abyss. And over there, see?" He pointed to a group of white buildings that looked like small toys from here. "That's where I carried you." "Wait, and your mum," Sharon remembered. "She told me the name of the restaurant. Is she in on this? Is she playing along with you?" "Well, Mum just helped me a little," Denny nodded. "How else would I get you here? And it's such a special day." "What day?" Sharon asked warily, feverishly searching her memory. Denny rolled his eyes. "Sharon, you are incorrigible," he sighed. "Today is exactly 10 years since the day we met, right here." Like a magician, he pulled out a bouquet of flowers from somewhere under the table, thankfully large enough for Sharon to hide her blushing face behind. Denny, who are D and T in your to-do list for the week?" she finally managed to ask. He looked at his wife and burst out laughing. After laughing for a good couple of minutes, he wiped away the tears that had welled up and said, "Why did you think that D and T were someone?" "Sharon, D is vitamin D, and T is tracksuit. You know, I always forget to take my pills or gym outfit, so I noted it down just in case." "Denny, I'm such a fool. Will you forgive me?" murmured the completely devastated Sharon. "Of course I will forgive you. Where can I go? Let's forget everything. Although I must admit I didn't know you were so jealous. I'm even a bit flattered. Listen, Sharon, the local chef, by the way, is absolutely wonderful. He specially prepared a dessert for us." Denny looked back and waved to the waiter, who nodded and immediately disappeared, but returned a couple of minutes later with a dish in his hands and, smiling solemnly, placed it on the table. "Here, happy anniversary." On the dish, judging by the appearance, lay a strawberry chocolate dessert. The chef had indeed worked hard, depicting their initials standing in a thin chocolate basket among strawberries in cream. The dessert was a small masterpiece of confectionery art, and any normal person would have frozen in admiration and then begun to worry, "How can I destroy and eat such beauty?" But apparently Sharon was not quite a normal person, because at the sight of the dessert she suddenly felt a sharp and completely unexpected attack of nausea. This was especially unexpected, given that Sharon had always been known for her omnivorous nature, strong stomach and excellent appetite. She, turning pale, jumped up, pressing her hand to her mouth, and rushed away. Denny, completely bewildered, waited for a few seconds and then rushed after her. He certainly did not imagine the reaction of his beloved woman to the specially prepared dish and the end of the romantic evening in this way. Staggering, she came out of the ladies' room. Denny was pacing nearby. "Sharon!" He ran up to her and took her hand, looking into her eyes. "What's wrong, dear? Did you get food poisoning? Oh, God! Let's go to the hospital right now, to the very one where I dragged you with a piece of glass in your foot. Can you walk, or should I carry you?" No matter how bad she felt, she couldn't help but laugh. "Denny, 10 years have passed. You won't be able to carry me now." Half an hour later, they were at the hospital, where fortunately a doctor well known to Denny was on duty. Sharon came out of the procedure room and quietly sat down next to Denny, who had rushed towards her. "Well, did you get food poisoning?" he asked worriedly. "I'll tear this place apart brick by brick. I don't know what I—" "Wait! Don't shout." Sharon reassuringly stroked her husband's hand. "They are not to blame. My condition is only your fault, Denny." "Dear, I'm pregnant." Denny shuddered and looked at her. If there was still any silly, unwanted suspicions left in her foolish, restless, and distrustful mind, they completely and without a trace dissolved in the radiance that lit up in his eyes. Standing before the window of a flower shop, Margot admired the fragrant array of blooms. She adored flowers, and her husband Walter, knowing this, often surprised her with bouquets, both for special occasions and just because. Today, however, she was not choosing flowers for herself. Margot looked around for a salesperson. Nearby, a young woman in a neat apron and gardening gloves was finishing up with a customer who had selected several deep burgundy roses with long stems for a bouquet. "One moment, please. I'll be right with you," the saleswoman said kindly, noticing Margot's gaze. The customer paid, took his bouquet, and headed towards the exit, while the young woman approached Margot with a friendly smile. "What kind of flowers are you looking for today? We just received a new shipment. The roses are all fresh, and our garden lilies are simply exquisite. Just look at them." The saleswoman pulled out a beautiful branch of lilies from a vase. "The white ones are stunning, but the pink ones are truly a marvel." "And the scent," Margot agreed. "I love flowers myself, but today I need to choose a bouquet for a man. You see, it's my husband's birthday. He's turning 40, and I suddenly realised I have no idea what kind of flowers to give a man, or if I should give them at all. Roses are perfect for both men and women, but for men you should avoid small buds, pink hues and any ribbons or bright shiny wrappings. Dark red roses are a classic and timeless choice." "Yes, that would be lovely," Margot replied. 10 minutes later she took the bouquet and hurried out of the flower shop, her heart filled with joy and anticipation. Stopping by the wine boutique on her way home, Margot selected a bottle of her husband's favourite cognac as a gift. She asked for it to be packaged along with the bouquet in a gift basket. Getting into her car, she took a positive pregnancy test in a nice box out of her purse and put it inside the basket. That was her main gift to her husband. Only then she headed home. The preparations for the celebration were in full swing. Music played, hired waiters set the tables in the garden, and appetizing aromas of festive dishes wafted from the kitchen. Several cars were parked along the fence, and early guests had already begun to gather for the host's birthday. Walter was nowhere to be seen in the yard, so she headed into the house. Just as she reached the door, she bumped into him. "Walter, I've been looking for you," she said excitedly. "I need to tell you something important right away." "Margot, I've been looking for you too," Walter replied with a gentle reproach. "You disappeared without a word, just said it was a surprise and left me here to handle everything. I'm the birthday boy, after all, and I have to run around and take care of everything. Besides, I have some news for you too." Walter wanted to continue, but his phone rang in his pocket. He apologised, took out the vibrating device, glanced at the screen, and said, "Margot, darling, let's speak a little later. It's an important call. I have to take it." The celebration was in full swing when Margot noticed that Walter, who had been the centre of attention, had suddenly vanished. She scanned the crowd but couldn't find him. Assuming he had stepped away for a break, she decided to look for him in the house. Walter often retreated to his study when he needed some quiet time, so Margot headed there without hesitation. The door to his study was slightly ajar, and she could hear voices inside. She paused, hearing an unfamiliar female voice say, "Look, this is my little one. Doesn't he look just like you?" "He really does," Walter replied with a smile. "When I was little, I looked just like him, judging by my childhood photos. But why didn't you tell me about him right away?" "Walter, I felt awkward coming to you, and with a child too," the woman said. "I was afraid you'd think I was trying to burden you with him, especially since you've already helped me so much." "Nonsense, Kerry," Walter replied. "I love children and have always dreamed of having a family. But Margot has issues, so it's not that simple." "Walter, if you ever want to confirm kinship, I'm ready to provide a DNA sample right away," the woman said seriously. "No, that's not necessary," Walter said casually. "I can see the resemblance in his round blue eyes and little button nose. I don't need a test to see a family bond." Margot stood frozen in shock, her heart racing as she processed the revelation. "Look, your little one has my nose and my eyes," Walter said, and the woman replied, "I'm so glad you turned out to be an honest and decent person, Walter. I'm so grateful to you. If you only knew." "It's nothing, really. I'm glad you came into my life. Come on, let's go meet the guests. I'll introduce you to everyone." "Maybe we shouldn't," the woman hesitated. "They're all so fancy and dressed up. What will they think when they see me? And what will your wife say when she finds out about me?" "Kerry, stop it," Walter said firmly. "You're not some stranger, and your son is related to me too. Let's go." "Good heavens, what am I hearing?" Margot finally came to her senses, quickly stepping away from the study door. "Does my husband have another woman? And not just any woman, but one who has given birth to his child? And this is when I found out about my pregnancy." Stepping out of the house, Margot paused, indecisive. She understood that the simplest thing to do now would be to approach her husband and demand an explanation, but she suddenly felt humiliated and deeply ashamed that she, the lawful wife, had not been able to give Walter a child, while some other woman had. She then felt a surge of jealousy towards this stranger named Kerry, with whom her husband had been speaking so tenderly in his study. "What should I do now?" she agonized. "I should have gone straight to him and demanded an explanation, instead of standing like a beggar at the door, listening to my husband, who promised to love only me, being so affectionate with this unknown woman. And where did this Kerry come from? I didn't notice her arrival. She must have snuck into the house secretly, taking advantage of the general commotion and festive atmosphere. No, I've had enough. I don't want to deal with any of this, and I can't stay here any longer." She pushed through the crowd of merry, tipsy guests and went to her car. Getting inside, Margot was surprised to find the bouquet of roses, her husband's favourite cognac, and positive test still on the back seat, along with the gift basket. In her haste to share the good news with Walter, she had forgotten to congratulate him on his birthday. "Fine, he has plenty to keep him busy without my congratulations," she thought bitterly, and started the engine and drove away from the house. Let him worry and think whatever he wants. Since childhood, Margot had dreamed of having a car. She loved speed, the thrill of driving and the rush of wind against the windshield. When she married Walter a year ago, he soon gave her a brand new sports car, practically the car of her dreams. Periodically, without needing a special reason, Margot would take the car out for a spin on the high-speed roads, which often worried her husband, who saw cars merely as a means of transportation. Driving onto the highway and picking up speed, Margot suddenly realised that she had forgotten to change out of her fancy evening shoes into more comfortable driving shoes. "Never mind, it's evening, the road is quiet. I'll drive for a bit, calm down, and then go back and demand an explanation from my husband," she thought, accelerating again. The powerful sports car flew down the highway like a bird, the smooth ribbon of asphalt unfurling beneath the wheels. The speedometer nearly approached its maximum, but the speed did not frighten her. Instead, it strangely calmed her. Relaxing, Margot suddenly felt that she had clearly overreacted, failed to understand the situation, and rushed out of the house like a foolish, impulsive girl. "That's it, Michael. I can't walk any more, I'm tired," said the young homeless woman, throwing her worn-out bag full of junk found in city dumps onto the highway. "Let's stop and sit for a bit, maybe under that tree," she said, pointing a dirty finger with a broken nail at a field aside the road. "What are you talking about, sister?" retorted her companion, who looked just as dishevelled. Dressed in a worn denim suit and sporting a scraggly beard, he looked like a man of indeterminate age, but an obvious lifestyle. "Look, the sun is already setting. Before you know it, it'll be dark. Or are you planning to spend the night in the middle of a field?" He sneered, but picked up the bag she had thrown down. "I'm tired and hungry," the homeless woman declared, refusing to move. "Anita, sister, do you think I'm not hungry too?" Michael retorted. "We did eat a bit before heading back, remember? We found a whole bag of stale pies in the dumpster by the cafe. You ate more than I did." "That was ages ago," Anita whined. "Those pies were difficult to chew and not very filling. You promised to take care of me, remember? So take care of me now. I'm tired and hungry. All the time. Got it?" "You're a bottomless pit. You're tiny, but you eat like a horse. I know what you're up to, Michael replied, exasperated. Earlier that day, the siblings had lucked out while scavenging through city dumpsters. They found 5 cans of beef stew, likely discarded by someone. Anita immediately wanted to open one of the cans and eat it, but the more practical Michael insisted they wait. "What's the point of eating it now?" he reasoned. "You'll just gobble it down and be hungry again in no time. Let's wait until we get back to our place. We can heat it up and make a proper meal out of it." "I'm hungry now, and you're such a miser, Michael," Anita shouted, plopping down on the asphalt. "I'm not going anywhere. I'll sit here all night if I'd like to." "You can't tell me what to do. I'm 18. I can do what I want. I can smoke, drink, and hang out with guys if I'd like to." "Get up. Cars drive on this road," Michael said, looking around at the deserted highway. He picked up his sister and dragged her off the road. "Scared, huh?" Anita taunted, struggling to free herself. "Give me a can, or I'll throw myself in front of a car, I swear." "You're insane, you know that?" Michael snapped, pulling a can of stew from his backpack. "Here, and don't you dare say you're hungry again any time soon, understand?" He led her to a nearby tree off the road. Anita, finally getting her way, followed him without a fuss. Sitting down under the tree, Michael pulled out a dirty knife and a bent aluminium spoon from his pocket. He opened the can and handed it to his sister, who devoured the contents in seconds. "Happy now?" Michael asked, as Anita licked the empty can clean. "There's more where that came from," she hinted, eyeing his backpack. "You're unbelievable," Michael said, shaking his head. "You just ate a whole can of stew, and you're still hungry. You're like a black hole. Come on, let's go home." He stood up and kicked the empty can away, grabbing his sister's arm to lead her back. "Let go of me!" Anita yelled, breaking free and running towards the highway. "Give me another can, or I'll throw myself in front of a car." Suddenly, the sound of a distant engine grew louder, and a sleek sports car appeared on the horizon, speeding towards them. "Stop, you idiot!" Michael shouted, noticing his sister's small, awkward figure darting across the highway in front of the speeding car. "Stop, you'll get hit!" he yelled, chasing after her. In the small evening clutch lying on the passenger seat, Margot's phone rang. Keeping one hand on the wheel and her eyes on the road, she reached for the bag with her other hand, fumbling for the phone. "Ah, there you are," she muttered, seeing that Walter was trying to call her. "I won't answer," she decided, though her earlier enthusiasm had waned. However, Walter, sensing something was wrong, persisted in calling her repeatedly, and Margot finally answered. "All right, I'll be home soon, and we'll talk then." She began to slow down, intending to turn around and head back home. As she reached to put the phone back in her bag, Margot glanced away from the road for just a moment. When she looked back, she gasped in horror and slammed on the brakes. In the headlights, she saw a small figure darting across the highway, followed by another. Margot, caught off guard, tried to brake hard, but her heel caught on the carpet, preventing her from stopping quickly. She swerved towards the shoulder, drove across the field, and finally came to a halt as the car's front end collided with a tree. "You idiot! You stupid fool!" Michael yelled, catching up to his sister and grabbing her by the collar. "Look what you've done! You've caused an accident, and someone might be hurt or even killed because of you!" He raged, shaking her. All right, let go," Anita pleaded, suddenly meek. "You'll tear my jacket and it's already worn out." "You won't get me a new one," she added, trying to pry his strong fingers off her. "You're worried about your jacket?" Michael snapped, though he released her. "What about the accident you caused? What are we supposed to do now? Call the police?" he demanded. "Michael, please don't call the police. I didn't mean to," Anita begged, frantically adjusting her tattered clothes. The man turned and headed towards the car, which had come to a stop in the field near a tree. Anita, at a loss, silently followed him. Approaching the car, Michael leaned down and peered inside. It was not yet completely dark, so he could easily see a young woman slumped over the steering wheel, held in place by her seatbelt. She showed no signs of life, but there was no blood in the car either. Michael opened the door and checked her pulse. "What's going on?" Anita asked, peering over his shoulder into the car. "Is she dead?" she asked indifferently, eyeing the woman's shiny evening bag on the passenger seat. "Keep your hands off!" Michael slapped her hand away. "The last thing we need is the police accusing us of theft on top of the accident. She's alive, just unconscious. Looks like she hit her head," he said, checking the woman's pulse. "Hey, lady, wake up," he called out, gently slapping her cheeks. When she didn't respond, he rummaged in his backpack and pulled out a plastic water bottle. "I'll splash some water on her face to revive her," he said, pouring a little water into her mouth. "She's coming to," Anita noticed, seeing the young woman stir. "Let's get out of here before she sees us," she urged, suddenly forgetting about the shiny evening bag she had been eyeing. "We can't just leave her," Michael protested. "It's almost night, and there won't be any traffic on the highway until morning. She might not be found until dawn." "So what? It's not our problem," Anita retorted, annoyed by her brother's unexpected concern for a stranger. "We can't leave her overnight, that's for sure, but we can't call the police either. Not with you causing the accident." He glared at his sister. "So we'll have to take her with us. Maybe she'll come to her senses and can take care of herself." He pulled the young woman out of the car and laid her on the grass. "Hey, lady, wake up! Come on! Open your eyes!" he said, gently patting her cheeks. Noticing the young woman finally opening her eyes, he said with relief, "Thank goodness you're awake. Come on, miss, get up. You can't lie on the grass, it's damp and cold. And it's getting dark." He helped the dazed young woman to her feet. "Where am I? What happened?" Margot murmured, looking around confused. "You were in an accident," Michael explained. "We found you, and we'll take care of you until you feel better. Lean on me. Let's get you somewhere safe." "I don't know who I am," the young woman stammered. "I don't remember anything." "Well, isn't this convenient?" Anita muttered, quickly snatching the shiny evening bag from the car and stuffing it into her pocket while her brother was distracted. "Some high-class lady you are, can't even remember your own name." "Give her a break," Michael said. "She might have hit her head and lost her memory." When the car was far behind, Anita carefully looked at her brother's back and, convinced that he was not paying attention to her, fell behind and pulled out the coveted find from her pocket. "Look at this!" she exclaimed with delight, examining the expensive item. "It's all sparkling like a diamond. I've never seen anything like it, not even when Mum and Dad were alive, and we lived in a normal apartment like everyone else," she said joyfully. Michael and Anita had not become homeless by choice 2 years ago. The siblings were born into an ordinary family. Their father, before succumbing to alcoholism, worked at a local factory, while their mother, lacking education, worked as a janitor for the local management company. They lived simply and modestly, like everyone else in the neighbourhood on the outskirts of the city. They had never seen extra money, and everything would have been fine if, one day, their father had not met an old friend. As often happens in such cases, the long-lost friends immediately went to celebrate their reunion, visiting all the local bars and eventually ending up at the home of some acquaintance of the friend. What caused their father, who only drank on holidays, to change so drastically is unknown, but it was after that fateful meeting with his old friend that he began to spiral out of control and soon became a real, perpetually hungover alcoholic. The father was fired from the factory for his constant drunkenness and frequent absences, after which the family's life became even harder, surviving only on their mother's meagre janitorial salary. However, the family's troubles did not end there. The completely alcoholic father was soon found dead on the street. One day, suspicious-looking individuals unexpectedly appeared at the doorstep of their family's apartment, claiming that the owner had taken out a loan using the apartment as collateral. Due to the borrower's death, they demanded either the repayment of the loan or the immediate vacating of the collateral property. Their mother first told the intruders to go to hell, and then threatened to scald them with boiling water from a whistling kettle if they did not leave the apartment immediately. The intruders, not expecting such resistance from an ordinary woman, thought it best to retreat behind the door, but threatened to return soon, and they did. The next day, neighbours found the mother lying beneath the window of her apartment, severely injured. The barely alive woman was rushed to the hospital, but she passed away a week later. Before her death, their mother, realizing that her days were numbered, asked for her children to be brought to her. In the presence of her daughter, she made her son, as the elder, swear to take care of his sister until she was securely settled in life. The police did not investigate the case thoroughly, concluding that the woman had accidentally fallen out of the window while trying to clean it, a tragic accident that could happen to anyone. After the mother's death, those same intruders reappeared at Anita's and Michael's apartment, this time demanding repayment of the debt from the children, their heirs of the suspiciously deceased parents. Anita was in her final years of school when Michael graduated from school last year and had been moonlighting as a delivery boy. There was no way they could repay the debt. The leader of the intruders then advised them not to resist, but to vacate the apartment, which now belonged to their credit organisation, since they had no more. "Get out of here while you can, if you value your lives," he menacingly whispered to Michael. "At least you'll stay alive, and we'll take the apartment, one way or another. Don't doubt it." To emphasise his seriousness, he punched Michael in the stomach. Frightened for himself and his sister, Michael quickly gathered some belongings and documents in front of the intruders, and they fled the city as fast as they could. The thought of going to the police never crossed their minds. "Where will we go now?" Anita wailed as they hurriedly left their home. "Where will we live? There are only fields and woods around." "I don't know," Michael replied grimly. "We just need to get as far away from these thugs as possible if we want to stay alive. We'll find some village to stay in temporarily. Many of them have empty houses," he suggested, trying to reassure his sister. However, things turned out slightly differently. Soon they encountered several travellers who appeared to be homeless. Michael decided to ask them about places where they could stay for free and safely hide out for an indefinite period. "We live in an abandoned children's camp in the woods. There are a few buildings there in pretty good condition. We are comfortable there, it's not far from here," one of the homeless men replied. "The police never come here, and the locals are afraid of us, so they stay away. And what about you? Why are you running away from someone?" he asked. "If only it were that simple," Michael sighed. "Our parents were killed over a debt, our apartment was taken away, and we barely escaped with our lives. Now we're looking for a place to go. Could we stay with you temporarily until we find somewhere else?" he asked hopefully. "Why not?" the first homeless man replied. "You're welcome to stay." Living in an abandoned, ruined camp in the forest turned out to be not as bad as they had initially imagined. The homeless cleared the underbrush, making a nice clearing around a building, and some even tilled the fertile forest soil and planted tomatoes and cucumbers around the edges of the clearing. They fetched water from a small river 1/2 kilometre from the forest, searched for mushrooms and berries in the summer, and went to the city for work. In short, life was tough but manageable. Soon the brother and sister settled in and stayed there for 2 whole years. This was certainly better than lying in the ground with their parents. Anita, however, free from the constraints of school and parents, she became quite unruly. Taking advantage of the fact that her brother was bound by their mother's promise, she soon turned into a capricious and willful individual, constantly nagging Michael with her whimsical character. After admiring the stolen handbag, Anita decided to explore its contents to see if there was anything valuable inside. Pulling the zipper, adorned with a brand logo and a large rhinestone, she opened the clasp and curiously peeked inside. Wow, what a lipstick! And the compact with a mirror! Classy! The homeless girl murmured in admiration, pulling out items common to any woman's handbag. Wow, there's even a phone here! Finally! Now I have my own phone, and I won't give it to Michael, she thought vengefully, glancing at her brother's distant figure. After examining the contact list of the stolen phone, and unexpectedly coming across a contact labelled Walter, beloved husband, Anita puffed up enviously and grumbled discontentedly under her breath. Of course, some people have loving husbands who give them expensive phones, lipsticks, compacts adorned with rhinestones, while others have to live in a ruined building and eat from the trash. Where's the justice in this world, huh? Suddenly, she had an idea. How much this Walter is willing to pay for his beloved wife. Clearly the man is not poor if he gives expensive gifts and cars, Anita concluded, and stuffing the phone into her pocket, returned the contents of the handbag, zipped it up, and put it in her other pocket. Well, life seems to be looking up, she said joyfully, and ran to catch up with her brother, who was already far ahead. Upon returning to the homeless camp with her brother, Anita did not immediately go to her own room. Taking advantage of the fact that Michael's attention was occupied by their unexpected guest, she slipped over to one of their neighbours. Descending the rotten steps, she quietly knocked on the shabby door. "Hey, Tony, are you there?" she asked. "If you are, answer. I need to talk to you."
"Anita, is that you?"
A hoarse, smoky voice replied from behind the door, and a shaggy head and puffy face appeared in the slightly open doorway.
"You'd better get out of here. Your brother forbade me to be friends with you. Look at this bruise under my eye. And besides, I'm busy right now."
He lied without hesitation. Anita knew very well that Michael was categorically against her friendship with Tony because of his constant drunkenness and striking untidiness. Anita, of course, remembered her brother's opinion about the neighbour, but she had no intention of listening to him on this matter. "Come on, Tony, relax," she replied carelessly. "Michael is busy with something else. He has a guest."
"What kind of guest?"
The neighbour grumbled without any enthusiasm. "A guest, a woman who is married to a rich man and has money herself," Anita replied.
Well, that's something," Tony smirked. "What would such a chick be doing here? Usually they live in country houses and foreign villas."
"I'm not making this up. If you don't believe me, go see for yourself," Anita huffed indignantly. "This woman just got into a car accident and Michael brought her to us for the night because she needs help. And no one drives on the highway at night."
"And how do you know she has money and is married to a rich man?"
Tony doubted.
"Even if she does, what do we care about her money?"
"Look at this phone she has," Anita replied, showing her find to the neighbour. "And there's a number saved as Walter, beloved husband. So I thought, what if this Walter doesn't know where his wife is and is looking for her, and we call him and quietly demand money for the woman who is sitting in our dwelling with Michael. In the worst case, we set a price for the information on where to find her. Want to make some money, Tony?" Anita asked slyly.
"All right, come in,"
Tony finally decided, opening the door for Anita. "But remember, you'll be the one calling this Walter," she said, slipping inside. "That's why I'm bringing you in on this. He might not believe me." Walter dialed his wife's number once more, again got no answer, and said perplexedly to Carey, standing next to him, "She's not answering. What's going on?" "What's the point of just calling? Maybe something happened to your wife," the woman replied. "You were told that she was seen getting into a car and driving off about 30 minutes ago. Maybe it makes sense to go and look for Margot yourself," she suggested. "Yes, you're right," he said anxiously. "Our guests will be partying until morning anyway, so I'll go look for her now," he decided, heading to his car parked by the entrance. "All right, then I'll call a taxi and go back to the hotel," Carey replied. "What's the point of me staying here? I've already done the main thing. Finally met you." "Oh, no," Walter disagreed. "Since you've turned up, you should stay with us for at least a few days. I've already arranged a room to be prepared, so I won't let you go anywhere." "Then I'll come with you," Carey said. "You never know. You might need help. And besides, I don't want to stay here without you," she admitted reluctantly. "All right, get in. Let's go together," Walter replied, opening the car door for Carey. Remembering Margot's love for speeding down the highway, Walter thought it made sense to search for her along the nearby highway. Driving out of the elite neighbourhood where their house was located, he stopped at the highway, wondering which direction to start the search. He needed to hurry. The twilight was deepening and visibility on the road was getting worse. After thinking for a few more seconds, Walter turned left and, accelerating, decided to check this section of the highway first. Fortunately, Walter's hunch was correct. Choosing the left side of the road, they found Margot's car about 10 kilometres from the starting point of the search. "It looks like it's been in an accident," Carey said with anxiety. "And that's definitely Margot's car," Walter replied, slowing down. Together with Carey, they rushed out of the car and ran to the accident scene. "Margot's not in the car, even though the doors are wide open. There is no phone or her purse either," Walter said worriedly, reaching the car first. "What are your relations with your wife like? Could it be that you had a fight and she just ran away from you?" Carey suggested. "Our relationship is great, and we haven't had a single serious argument in the year we've been together," Walter replied thoughtfully. "In fact, Margot was going to tell me some happy news today, but didn't get the chance because the guests started arriving," he noted, opening the trunk of the car. "See, there's a gift basket with a bouquet and my favourite cognac. So Margot was going to congratulate me on my birthday. She wanted to do something nice for me since she went to buy flowers and cognac herself. I just don't understand why she didn't congratulate me in the end. And, moreover, why would she want to run away on my own birthday?" Walter said, shrugging in bewilderment. "Walter, I think I know what's going on," Carey suddenly said. "Don't you think the reason could be me? Maybe Margot saw me by chance, thought something wrong about it, and left the house on an emotional impulse. After all, you didn't tell her a word about me," the woman suggested. "It may have sense. But where do we look for her now? And most importantly, what happened to her?" Walter asked anxiously, looking around. "Margot, answer me, please, if you're here!" he called out loudly. "Walter, wait. Don't get upset," Carey said, looking into the open car interior. "Shine your phone's flashlight here. I'm a medic, an operating room nurse, and I worked in a trauma centre for several years. I can tell you right away that the accident probably wasn't serious. See, there's no blood in the car, and the bumper isn't badly damaged, so Margot shouldn't have been seriously injured," she reassured him. "Yes, thank goodness for that, but where is she?" Walter continued to worry. "Margot, where are you?" he called out again into the gathering darkness, but received no response. Suddenly the surrounding silence was broken by the sound of an incoming call. Walter irritably pulled his phone out of his pocket, intending to decline the call, but when he saw who was calling, he muttered in surprise.
It can't be. It's Margot. I didn't even dare hope. Margot, sunshine, where are you? He asked with relief, answering the call. I've been looking for you. My feet are killing me. How could you do this? He gently reproached his wife. This isn't Margot. A raspy male voice chuckled in response. And if you want your wife back, alive and well, then listen to our conditions. The strange caller rasped, barely able to speak clearly. Is this some kind of joke? Walter asked, even more surprised. Who am I speaking with? Put my wife on the phone right now, do you hear me? He demanded resolutely. Hey, man, are you deaf or something? The caller rasped back. I'm telling you in plain language. We have your wife, so listen to our conditions, he stubbornly repeated. I'm not listening to anything, Walter retorted. At least not until I hear my wife's voice on the phone. Come on, call her over now. Refusing to believe that anything bad had happened to Margot, he pressed the raspy caller. There was a pause on the phone. Some rustling and muffled murmuring could be heard. Hey, where did you go? Hello? Walter said angrily into the phone. Answer me right now. What the hell is going on? He began to lose patience. This guy wants to talk to his wife, Tony said, covering the phone speaker with his hand as he listened to Anita's conversation. What do we do now? Damn it, I didn't think of that, Anita said, puzzled. All right, tell him you'll call back, and you stay here quietly. I'll figure this out. Hey, don't rush, I'll call back soon, Tony said to Walter, hung up and handed the phone back to Anita with a shaky hand. She put it in her jacket pocket, said nothing, and left his room, heading straight to her own. Michael was there, sitting on a crude wooden stool in the corner, peeling potatoes. The injured woman sat nearby on a bench, silently gazing at the shabby walls of the dwelling in bewilderment. Anita paused thoughtfully at the doorway. For her plan to work, Michael was clearly in the way. Where have you been wandering? Tell me, her brother asked unkindly, noticing Anita lingering in the doorway. Were you visiting that drunk again? Confess right now, he demanded. It's all his fault, Anita whined in response. I was just walking by and he jumped out at me. Good evening, Anita, he says. Where have you been? We used to be such good neighbours. And then he slapped me below my spine. She dramatically acted out the made-up scene. What? So the black eye I gave him wasn't enough? But don't worry, he'll get more now. Michael fumed, dropping the potatoes and jumping up from the stool. You stay here, keep an eye on our guest, and finish peeling the potatoes for dinner. I'll be back in 5 minutes, he said to his sister, and looking stern, left the room. Hey, you, take this phone, Anita said hurriedly to the woman as soon as her brother was gone. I'm going to call a guy, and you'll say something like, Hi, dear, she explained, placing the phone in the girl's hand and dialing Walter's number. However, the phone started ringing itself. Walter, who was waiting for the stranger to call back, lost his last bit of patience and started dialing his wife's phone. And what is this? Michael asked sternly, suddenly appearing in the doorway of the dugout. You little brat! He grabbed Anita by the collar of her jacket. And I didn't believe that drunk Tony. When he said you were planning to ask money from the woman's husband, I thought he was lying. But it turns out he was telling the truth. The brother shook his sister like a naughty kitten by the scruff of her neck. Give back everything you took from the car right now, he demanded angrily. Meanwhile, the injured guest looked in surprise at the phone ringing in her hand and unexpectedly answered the call, putting the phone to her ear. Hello? Hello, hey! Answer me right now! Where is my wife? Walter shouted into the phone. Walter, it's me, Margot said joyfully. Don't worry, I'm fine, I'll be home soon, she added excitedly. Great, I knew she'd come to her senses, Michael exclaimed, letting go of his sister. She must have heard her husband. Then he turned back to Anita and sternly said, Quickly, give me back everything you stole from the car, or do I need to explain something again? No, I understand, Michael, Anita hastily replied, afraid of her brother's disciplinary measures. Here, take it. You don't have to ask twice, she muttered, pulling out Margot's sparkling evening bag from her pocket. With a clear look of regret, the homeless girl gave the bag back to its owner. You keep it, if you like it so much, Margot suddenly said in response. I should thank you somehow for your help, Michael, she said, looking at the embarrassed Michael. Well, it's nothing. The man modestly lowered his eyes. But what about the contents of the purse? Should I return them, or can I keep them? Anita asked, not letting the conversation drift. Take it all, Margot waved her hand. Can you take me to where my car is? Of course. I'll take you there right now. Let's go. Michael replied with a smile, and turning to his sister, he added sternly, And you are grounded. While I'm gone, stay here. Peel the potatoes and then start cooking them. Understand? And by the way, even though you don't deserve it, you've been given such a valuable gift. Where's your thank you? Thank you, Anita waved him off, pleased as she admired herself in the compact mirror. Don't be mad at her, Michael said to Margot. There's no one to discipline her, and as the older brother, I promised my mother before she died that I would look after my sister. I apologize, he explained. And please don't report Anita to the police. If she gets arrested, she'll be ruined. Of course I won't. What police? Margot replied and asked, So, your mother died? Not just died. She was killed, just like our father. Michael sighed in response. They died because of the apartment that our father allegedly used as collateral. And they almost got rid of us too. That's why we ran away 2 years ago. Wherever our eyes lead us. And that's how we became homeless, he exclaimed grimly. Yes, that's sad, I'm sorry, Margot replied. But 2 years have passed. Maybe everything has settled down. And maybe you can return to your old life now, she thoughtfully noted. Maybe, Michael smiled in response. I need to think about it. Well, shall we go? Your husband must be waiting for you, and it's already dark, he reminded her. Margot, finally! Walter exclaimed, seeing his wife walking towards him across the field. And who is this with you? He asked warily, noticing Michael. Shining his phone's flashlight on him, he asked, Is this the guy who demanded money? No, he is a good man. Margot smiled in response and explained. This is Michael. He took me in right after the accident, so that I wouldn't have to spend the night in the wrecked car. You're something, Walter said, but I can't understand where you are heading at night. Margot was about to reply, but didn't get the chance. Good evening, a woman's voice suddenly sounded behind her. Margot turned around, and the smile instantly vanished from her face. Judging by the voice standing before her was the very same Kerry, because of whom she had left home in a fit of emotion. Good evening to you too, Margot replied coldly. My name is Kerry. I was sitting in Walter's car while we were waiting for you, she explained. But when you appeared, I decided I should come over and introduce myself. In Walter's car, I see, Margot acknowledged Kerry with a disdainful look. Yes, it's really time to meet, Walter decisively intervened. Margot, meet Kerry, my half-sister, from my father's side. What? A half-sister? Margot asked in surprise. I've never heard that you have a sister. I thought I didn't have, but recently, Walter replied happily, she contacted me herself and asked for help. She's a single mother with a small child and got entangled with a ruthless con artist who saddled her with a huge debt and disappeared. But that's a long story. I'll tell you all about it. Margot, believe me, I would never have asked him for help if I weren't in a desperate situation, Kerry said fervently. And you did the right thing by asking. Walter replied. I hardly have any relatives left, and now I suddenly have 2 more, he added contentedly. 2? Margot asked. So the child you mentioned. That's my little nephew. And what did you think? Walter laughed. By the way, you eavesdropped at the door? That's not nice. He playfully wagged his finger at her. It's not nice to keep secrets from your wife, Margot retorted. Margot, my dear, I wasn't hiding anything, Walter disagreed. I was waiting for Kerry to arrive for my birthday and wanted to tell you about her, and you were also going to share some important news with me, he reminded his wife. Yes, Walter, you're right. And yes, this is your birthday present, my dear husband, Margot remembered, opening the trunk of her damaged car and handing Walter the gift basket with cognac and a bouquet. Thank you, my love, I'm very pleased, Walter replied, although, to be honest, I already discovered your gift a little while ago, he admitted. That's not a problem, Margot said, not at all embarrassed. I have another piece of news that will make you just as happy as this gift basket, she said intriguingly. Well, don't keep me in suspense then, Walter urged his wife. What is it? And you, Walter, were wrong when you said that your circle of relatives had increased by 2 people, Margot replied mysteriously. The thing is, your circle of relatives will soon start to grow even more. I'm pregnant. Walter, I got a call from the reproductive clinic today, and they told me that I can have children naturally, without any IVF, she exclaimed. That was the important news. Wow, that's wonderful! Walter looked at Margot in astonishment and, hugging her, noted, That's why they say you shouldn't celebrate your 40th birthday. In my opinion, that's nonsense. Today is the best birthday I've ever had, he confidently added.
Lorena stepped out of the apartment building into the fresh May morning. The air was fragrant with blooming lilacs. The sky was clear and bright. Summer was just around the corner. Her 3-year-old son, Adam, was already at kindergarten, taken there by her husband, Tyler. Tyler worked as a programmer and often worked remotely from home. He was not just a wonderful husband, he was caring, kind, attentive, and, most importantly, understanding. When Lorena returned from work tired, he didn't need to be told. He would silently make tea, prepare a cosy nest on the sofa with a blanket and pillow, and take Adam to another room so Lorena could have some quiet time. Lorena's job was stressful but rewarding. She worked as an endocrinologist in a private medical centre. The only downside was that she had to combine her medical duties with paperwork. Usually she could find time during the day to fill out the necessary documents, but not always. But yesterday patients kept coming in a steady stream, so Lorena had to take the report home. The next morning, Lorena had almost reached her car when she remembered that she had left the report at home. Thank goodness she remembered in time. Lorena turned around and hurried back to the apartment building. She bounded up the steps, her heart racing, quickly unlocked the door to her apartment and went into the kitchen. Suddenly, she heard a muffled conversation coming from their bathroom. Tyler was on the phone with someone, engrossed in the conversation. It must be about work, but his tone was strange, tender, almost cooing. Lorena picked up the report and tiptoed towards the bathroom. She froze outside the door and listened. Gwen, dear, you know I have work to do, but I'll definitely come see you on the weekend. What do you want me to bring you? Lorena couldn't believe her ears. Tyler, her caring and attentive husband, was talking to another woman with such tenderness and love. Yes, darling, I miss you so much. I love you too. There was so much tenderness and love in Tyler's voice that Lorena's heart ached with longing and jealousy. She had always thought they had a perfect family, that their relationship was special, harmonious, reliable and sincere. She had even been surprised that such a thing was possible. And now it turned out it was all an illusion. Tyler was just pretending to be the perfect husband and father, using his flexible schedule as a cover for his affair. How else could she explain this strange phone conversation? Lorena turned around and walked towards the exit. She had heard enough. Her blood was pounding in her temples, her face was hot, but her hands were strangely cold. Somehow she managed to quietly slip out of the apartment. In the comfort of her beloved car, Lorena felt a little better. She turned on the music, started the engine and drove off. But all the way to the medical centre, she couldn't stop thinking about Tyler. Strangely, she wasn't thinking about what to do next. Those thoughts came later. Instead, she found herself remembering the beginning of their relationship. Lorena and Tyler first met at a mutual friend's party. Lorena was a senior medical student at the time, while Tyler had already graduated from university a couple of years earlier and was working as a programmer at a large firm. Lorena noticed him right away. He wasn't trying to be the centre of attention, but made witty remarks at just the right moments. Unlike the other guys, he barely drank and was quite handsome, tall, dark-haired and fit. "He's a hottie, isn't he?" The birthday girl nudged Lorena and winked conspiratorially. "Want me to introduce you?" Lorena panicked and protested. She wanted to get to know the handsome guy better, but not like this, not through a setup. That evening, Lorena was the centre of male attention. The striking figure, bright blue eyes, chestnut shiny hair, cascading in soft waves below the shoulders. Lorena herself knew she was beautiful. At first the compliments and admiring glances from the guys were pleasant, but then they began to be overwhelming and even frightening. One of the admirers was particularly zealous. He constantly hovered around, telling her something, even trying to hug her. The guy had had a lot to drink. Lorena already didn't know how to get rid of him. Salvation came from an unexpected side. Tyler approached Lorena and looked her in the eyes with a smile. He, as it were, asked, "Has he bothered you enough?" The girl silently nodded with a smile, and Tyler held out his hand to her. "I thought you might need help," he said quietly when they found themselves outdoors. The sky was studded with bright stars, and it was quiet and very peaceful around. The silence was almost deafening after the din of the party, and from this, or from Tyler's closeness, the girl felt slightly dizzy. "Thank you. I didn't really know how to get rid of him anymore. Anyway, I don't want to go back there," Lorena confessed. "Well, as for me, I ended up there by chance. I don't even know the birthday girl, but I'm overjoyed that I was here today and met such a wonderful girl. I've been watching you all evening." Lorena felt herself blushing. She had often been complimented, and it was always pleasant, but Tyler's words filled the girl with some special warmth. The young people walked around the city, talked and laughed. Lorena felt as if she had known Tyler for 100 years. Relationships developed rapidly. With Tyler, Lorena felt truly calm and happy. She had never met such a deep, sincere and reliable person before. Unlike many guys Lorena knew, Tyler was kind and not ashamed of it. He never tried to appear brutal, macho or prove something to someone. The guy surprised Lorena with his domesticity from the very first days of their acquaintance. Unlike her, who had lived with her parents, he knew how to cook. In his 3-bedroom apartment, there was always order. While Lorena sometimes did not have time to clean up even in her own room. But the main thing was that Tyler understood Lorena. He subtly felt Lorena's mood, understood when she was tired or angry, and always knew how to cheer up the girl and lift her spirits. Lorena often noticed hidden sadness in the eyes of her beloved. Others did not see this. Tyler skillfully played the role of a carefree guy who had everything good in life, but Lorena knew what the matter was. Yes, Tyler's past turned out to be not easy. He was born to a mother who at that moment did not need a baby at all. Barbara, Tyler's mother, grew up in a well-to-do family. Her father was the top manager at the factory, and his mother was a primary school teacher, and they both were preparing a brilliant future for her. After school, she was supposed to enter a prestigious university, then go to work in the Ministry of Finance. His father had connections there, but Barbara, most of all, wanted to hang out with friends and have fun. She looked with envy at the companies of teenagers sitting at the entrances and singing songs to the guitar. She dreamed of being part of this fun crowd. But she couldn't rebel against her parents. If she could still somehow deal with her mother, her father, he kept his daughter in an iron grip. He was always afraid that she would follow in the footsteps of his eldest unsuccessful sister. Barbara didn't even know this aunt of hers, but they said she was a drinking woman who often changed lovers and didn't work anywhere. Barbara obeyed her parents, but secretly hated them. She waited for adulthood. Then she would finally gain her longed-for freedom, and no one would stop her any more. But Barbara gained her freedom earlier. When the girl was 13, her father had a heart attack right at work. The man could not be saved. Since then, the life of the family has changed a lot. There was no longer a strict father who could keep the freedom-loving Barbara at home with textbooks and a piano. There was no one to be afraid of. So it turned out that Barbara was left to her own devices. In the life of the teenage girl, there were now friends, alcohol, adventures, and romances. Everything she had long dreamed of. And after graduating, she declared to her mum, "I'll go to work. I'm sick of your studying." Barbara really got a job. At first, she tried her hand as a saleswoman, then worked as a baker's assistant. But it turned out that money is not so easy to come by. So the girl decided why to break her back. Mum feeds, gives clothes and roof, and there are always guys and men willing to pay her and entertain her for a small service. No matter how Barbara's mother tried to reason with her wayward daughter, nothing worked. Then one day, Barbara said to her mum, "I'm expecting a baby. The term, it turns out, is already decent. It cannot be interrupted. Do you have acquaintances who can help with this?" "What are you talking about?" her mother said, astonished. "This is a crime, and it's great harm to health. Now you have to give birth, since you have delayed so much." But Barbara did not want to give birth. She spent hours lying in a hot bath, trying to provoke a miscarriage, drinking herbal infusions, lifting weights, running up and down the stairs to exhaustion. Nothing helped. At term, despite Barbara's lifestyle and unwillingness to give birth, a healthy, strong boy was born in the maternity hospital. The new grandmother hoped that now her daughter would finally get her act together. And how else? But Barbara could no longer be corrected. Having got rid of the hated, heavy burden, the young woman immediately slipped away to friends and cavaliers. The baby, named Tyler, turned out to be unnecessary for her. He was raised by his grandmother. Since it didn't work out with her daughter, the woman took bringing her grandson up with redoubled energy. Tyler remembered that he lived peacefully and happily with his grandmother. He always studied well and behaved excellently at school. In high school, the guy became interested in programming. The grandmother took part of her savings and bought her grandson an expensive computer. After school, Tyler entered the Faculty of Information Technology. Studying was easy for him. He soon began to work part-time. But when the guy was in his 4th year, the closest and dearest person to him suddenly passed away. The heart of the not-yet-old woman did not bear it. Of course, worries about her daughter undermined her health. Tyler was in deep grief. He could not come to terms with the fact that there is not a single person on this earth who truly loves him. He secretly hoped that he would see his mother at the funeral, but Barbara never showed up. Gradually, life took its course. The guy graduated from the university, got a job, and new plans and desires, friends and entertainment appeared. Youth is youth. And then Tyler accidentally met Lorena and fell in love at first sight. That's the kind of story it was. And before this day, Lorena thought they had an ideal relationship. But now there was this Gwen. Lorena realised that she could not deal with the onslaught of emotions and feelings alone, and decided to call her best friend Sarah. If anyone could help her make sense of what had happened, it was her. Lorena could hardly wait until lunchtime. Work, of course, was a distraction, but anxious thoughts kept her from focusing on her patients' problems. She listened to them, made typical prescriptions, and recorded their complaints in their charts. But all she could hear was her husband's tender voice, cooing with some unknown Gwen. Finally, the lunch break arrived. Lorena immediately dialed her friend's number and poured out to Sarah everything she had overheard that morning. Are you sure you didn't make a mistake? Sarah's voice sounded bewildered. This doesn't sound like Tyler at all. It's difficult to even imagine. Anyway, don't rush into anything. First you need to figure out what's going on. Why don't you just ask him directly? Directly? I don't know. He'll start making excuses, come up with something. I want to gather evidence first, so I can be sure myself, and so he can't deny it. After talking to her friend, Lorena felt a bit lighter, her thoughts clearer. She would be more attentive now. She would catch the hidden signs, delays at work, the scent of women's perfume, secret text messages. What else do lovers have? Yes, Lorena was not ready to make any decisions right away. She needed to think everything through, prepare for the separation, and meanwhile, she would have to pretend that nothing was happening. Would she be able to pull it off? She would have to summon all her acting skills. It had to work. That evening, everything was as usual. Tyler had prepared dinner. He had worked from home all day, but he found the time to roast a chicken with potatoes and make a salad. The apartment greeted Lorena with tantalising aromas. Adam was already home. And here comes our mum. Tyler smiled and hugged Lorena tightly. Why such a face? You must be tired. Go take a bath, wash away the negativity, and I'll set the table in the meantime. Lorena forced a smile in response and went to the bathroom. She closed the door behind her and looked in the mirror. She wasn't much of an actress, that was clear. Her face bore an expression of universal grievance. Everything was obvious at once. But Tyler, on the other hand, was quite the actor. The picture of contentment. And those honest eyes. Everything as usual. Incredible. Maybe it really was all just a misunderstanding. She didn't want to believe that Tyler was a scoundrel and a traitor. Lorena took a shower, changed into a housecoat and went to the kitchen. What a delicious dinner. Lorena genuinely praised her husband. I could never make it like this. I love cooking for you. Tyler smiled broadly. Why don't we go to the water park on Saturday? Adam suddenly suggested. We haven't been in so long. We can't do it this weekend. Tyler shook his head, his eyes immediately filling with sadness. Work, son. I need to work this weekend. Figures. The boy pouted, looking sullen. Lorena remembered how her husband had promised the mysterious Gwen that he would visit her this weekend. If she hadn't overheard the conversation, she would have suspected nothing. Tyler had an irregular schedule. He was often called into the office on weekends, but now Lorena was sure. Her husband was planning to visit his mistress. That same evening, Lorena talked everything to Sarah. Follow him and see where he goes. I'll look after Adam, don't worry. I will wait near the entrance in the morning until he came out. Thank you. Great idea. I'll follow him and see everything with my own eyes. In the morning, Tyler pretended to be getting ready for work. He drank his coffee, packed his laptop in his backpack, and put on pants and a shirt. While he was busy, Lorena slipped out of bed and pulled on jeans, a t-shirt and a sweater. She needed to leave the apartment right after her husband to avoid losing his trail. Over all this, she threw on a long housecoat, a disguise. As usual, Tyler kissed his wife goodbye, hugged her tenderly, and said he would miss her. What hypocrisy! He's going to see his mistress and putting on such a farewell scene. Sarah was already near, and as soon as Tyler got in the car, she slipped into the entrance. As Lorena had expected, Tyler drove past his office. Too bad, but she was prepared for this. Tyler turned onto a country road. Lorena hurried after him. Strange, did his mistress live in some village? Fields and plantations flashed by on both sides of the road. Tyler's dark blue SUV moved in the distance, barely visible. There were few cars on the road, so Lorena kept her distance. Tyler turned right and disappeared behind an oak grove. When Lorena's car reached the turn, Tyler's SUV was already entering the open gates. Behind the grove, in the middle of a field, stood a tall, pale green fence. Behind the high fence, the outlines of a grey 3-story building were visible. As the car entered the inner courtyard, the gates slowly closed. The structure looked like an impregnable fortress. This was not what Lorena had expected to see. She parked her car behind the bushes, not daring to approach any closer, and feeling frightened. What had he gotten himself into? Suddenly the mistress' story didn't seem so terrible. Something strange and incomprehensible was happening. Lorena finally made up her mind. She cautiously stepped out of the car and slowly approached the gate. There was a sign above the gates: Medical and Social Institution for Children with Special Needs. What did this mean? Lorena had even more questions now. Feeling confused, she returned to her car and decided to wait for Tyler and ask him directly. Lorena reclined in her seat and gazed up at the bright blue sky. Fluffy white clouds drifted across it. Some insects hummed in the air. It was beautiful here. Only the ugly building surrounded by a tall fence marred the view. 4 hours of waiting passed. Cars occasionally approached the building. Not many. Lorena counted about 5 or 6. They disappeared behind the gates, just like Tyler's SUV, but none of them re-emerged. The sun was already setting when the gates slowly opened again, and Tyler's SUV finally emerged. Of course, he noticed his wife parked behind the bushes, and pulling over to the side of the road, he stopped, got out, and walked slowly towards Lorena's vehicle, his eyes filled with sadness, his head bowed, and his shoulders slumped. It pained Lorena to see her usually cheerful husband in such a state. Although she had always noticed this sadness in his eyes, even in the happiest moments, but she had thought it was because of his difficult history with his mother. But apparently there was something more. "Hi," Tyler said, embarrassed, as he sat down in the passenger seat. "Honestly, I didn't expect to see you here." "Tyler, please, tell me everything. You don't have to hide anything from me. I want to know what's going on. What is this place? Why did you come here?" "It's a long and complicated story. I'm confused and don't know what to do. I didn't want to burden you with all this. I thought I would protect you from unnecessary worries and problems. I'm not at peace myself, and I didn't want to trouble you." "We are a family," Lorena reminded him, and placed her hand over her husband's. Tyler sighed, but his eyes were no longer so sad, and the burden weighing on him seemed to lift a little. His shoulders straightened, and his voice became more confident. "Well, okay, there's no way out now. You would have to find out anyway. Who could have guessed that you have the spirit of Miss Marple in you?" Talking about Tyler's mother was always painful for his grandmother. Her eyes would dim and her shoulders would slump. In those moments, she looked so unhappy that Tyler quickly changed the subject. One day, when Tyler was already at a high school, she called him for a serious talk and told him everything about her only daughter, Barbara. "Grandma, and how is Mum now? Is she alive?" "She's alive," the woman quickly replied. "She's alive, don't worry. She's doing well by her standards, living the way she always wanted." Tyler felt relieved. He had never known his mother. He understood that she had left him, rejected him, but the thought that this woman might no longer be alive was somehow frightening. Tyler had never seen her in his conscious years. His grandmother showed him childhood and teenage photos of Barbara, so in Tyler's mind, his mother was a cheerful, pretty girl with unruly russet hair and laughing eyes. "Do you communicate with her?" Tyler asked another question that bothered him greatly. The boy understood that he needed to take everything from this candid conversation. There might not be another opportunity. It was clearly difficult for his grandmother to recall memories of her daughter. "It can't be called communication," the woman answered. "I know where she is. It's a small town where we used to live. My old acquaintances sometimes tell me how Barbara is doing. Everything is relatively normal there. She drinks, of course, but other than that, she's fine." Tears welled up in Tyler's eyes. He suddenly felt truly abandoned and unwanted. "I can't upset Grandma. There's no need to be sentimental now. Think about something else," he thought, and with a tearful smile. "Enough about the sad things. I've found out everything I need to know. I have a mother, but she wanted to start a new life. That's all." From that day forward, Tyler often thought about his mother. What does she look like now? What does she do? Who does she live with? And most importantly, does he have any brothers or sisters? Time flew by quickly. Before he knew it, Tyler enrolled in a university, studying information technology. But thoughts of his mother never left the young man. He firmly decided that sooner or later he would find her. And then, what he had feared all his conscious childhood happened. His grandmother did not survive another heart attack. The young man took the loss very hard. He withdrew into himself, stopped communicating with friends. During this time, thoughts of his mother haunted him constantly. She was the only family he had left in the world. Tyler felt an overwhelming urge to find her. One day, he made up his mind. In the morning, Tyler went to the train station and bought a ticket to the town where he knew his mother lived. It was time to meet her and get answers to important questions. He couldn't stay in the dark any longer. Whatever happens, happens. The station was deserted. Here it was, the town where his mother lived. A small, sleepy place that looked more like a large village. Tyler knew his mother's address. He had found it in his grandmother's thick notebook. The woman meticulously wrote down important things: birthdays of friends and relatives, phone numbers, dates of doctor's visits. Tyler asked for directions to the station. It turned out to be not far. Great. He would take a walk, stretch his legs a bit and gather his thoughts. He desperately hoped that his mother would welcome him warmly. She would cry, apologize, explain why she hadn't shown up all these years. Maybe she had been ashamed. Tyler, of course, would forgive her. He held no grudge against the woman who had left him and run away. She had been very young and inexperienced. Perhaps she regretted her actions now. And there it was, the house he was looking for. A leaning fence, a cluttered garden overgrown with tall grass, peeling paint on the walls. And what was wrong with the roof? Had it leaked? How could anyone live like this? Tyler cautiously knocked on the gate. Somewhere deep in the garden, a dog barked lazily. And then silence. "Come on in, young man, don't be shy," an old woman from the neighbouring yard called out to him friendly. Barbara never locks her gate. Are you from social services? Or maybe the press?" "From social services," Tyler replied, glad he didn't have to come up with an explanation himself. Tyler entered the yard of the house where his mother lived. His heart pounded dully in his chest, and his mouth felt dry. Everywhere he looked there were signs of neglect. In the corner, behind a blackened, leaning wooden outhouse, with a door that wouldn't close, there was a makeshift dump. Broken furniture, plastic and glass bottles, some shards, food packaging. Deep in the overgrown garden, he could see a small old house. The door was half open, either broken or the owner was expecting someone. Or maybe she just wasn't used to locking it. Tyler entered the dark room. It smelled of dust, dirt and mould, and there was a strong smell of stale alcohol in the air. It was an unpleasant place. The floor hadn't been cleaned in years, covered in a layer of sand and dust. Bottles were scattered everywhere. The old, dried-out furniture was covered with dirty rags. Tyler couldn't help but remember his grandmother's clean apartment. She cleaned it herself every day and had taught her grandson to do the same. Tyler thought about the conditions he would have grown up in if he had stayed with his mother. And for the first time, a thought flashed through his mind. Maybe it was all for the best. Maybe it was good that the party-loving young woman had left her son with her mother and run away. Tyler walked into the large room that served as the living room. On the sofa, covered with a crumpled and clearly unwashed sheet, a woman was dozing. The young man recognized her immediately. It was Barbara from the photograph, only much older and with the signs of a dissolute life on her face. His mother opened her eyes, probably sensing that someone had come in. She looked at the stranger, but showed no fear. Barbara struggled to her feet and looked at the visitor questioningly, clearly expecting an answer. Tyler had imagined this first meeting many times, but now he just looked at the woman standing before him and couldn't find the words. The young man didn't know that in a brief moment one could experience such a storm of emotions. Pity, disgust, contempt, fear. The woman looked like the marginal types Tyler sometimes encountered on the streets of his city. Emaciated, with a puffy face of an earthy colour, small, watery, sunken eyes, dishevelled, thin hair, hastily tied in a stubby ponytail, broken, dirty, yellowish nails on calloused hands. "Who are you?" the homeowner finally asked. Her voice was hoarse and very much like a crow's cawing. Tyler was at a loss. "If you're from the guardianship, get out of here," Barbara declared resolutely. There was a threat in her eyes. "Everything is fine with us." "I'm Tyler," the young man finally managed to say. "Tyler, your son. Don't you recognize me?" "I see." The woman lowered her eyes as if pondering something. Tyler decided that she might be feeling ashamed and patiently waited for her to continue. "So, Tyler, that's what you look like. All grown up. An adult. You came because of the inheritance, right? We need to sign some papers. Part of my mother's apartment is mine, as you know. I was going to come to you myself. I need the money so badly, as you can see." Tyler looked at his mother in amazement. So she knew that her mother was dead, and she did not come to her funeral, did not want to see her son, who was all alone in the world. What kind of person is she? And she still hopes for some inheritance. But the granny had taken care of that in advance. "I'm not here about the inheritance," Tyler declared. "I just wanted to see you. We're not strangers, after all." "What about the inheritance?" Barbara asked eagerly. There was hope in her eyes.
Tyler silently shook his head. Grandma left the apartment to me.
I just knew it, Barbara said with annoyance. The old witch never loved me. So why did you come here anyway?
I have some questions for you. Tyler finally regained full control of himself, shedding his illusions. There would be no familial warmth, love, or remorse. His mother was a selfish person, focused only on her own pleasures.
Get out of here with your questions.
Barbara waved her hand dismissively. She was clearly upset by the news that she wouldn't get anything from her mother's inheritance. I have the right to know, Tyler insisted. Who is my father?
I don't know myself, Barbara answered honestly. I was popular with men back then. I had such admirers. Not like now. One of them must be your father, but I can't even remember his name now.
And why? Why did you abandon me?
Can't you figure it out yourself?
Barbara snapped, her eyes flashing with anger.
I wasn't even 20. I wanted to have fun, to live life to the fullest. And then pregnancy. I hated you from the moment I found out you existed inside me.
Tyler found it difficult to listen to this confession.
But I was quite satisfied when this old witch had taken all the care about you. I had money, plenty of admirers, and no one to nag or reproach me. Freedom! How happy I was to be free, without you, without a mother who always demanded something from me. It was such bliss.
Tyler blinked in confusion. He already regretted coming here. And then something completely unexpected happened. There was a strange rustling behind the living room door, and a small, thin, dirty creature with tangled, matted hair appeared in the room. It was a little girl. She didn't walk into the living room, but literally crawled in. The child skillfully used her arms to move quickly, and her legs looked too weak and thin compared to the rest of her body. Tyler instantly forgot all the horrible things he had just heard from his mother. What kind of children could live in such filth and neglect? The little girl looked at the guests with curiosity and, it seemed, hope. Tyler rushed to her and lifted the girl from the cold, dirty floor. She trustingly wrapped her thin arms around his neck and suddenly smiled. The young man recognized that smile. It was his smile. "Who is this?" he asked Barbara, although he already knew the answer.
"Your sister Gwen," Barbara muttered. "I had the operation after you, so I wouldn't have any more children, but she was born anyway."
What's wrong with her? Tyler couldn't take his eyes off his little sister. A storm of emotions raged in his chest. His heart was filled with tenderness and pity for this skinny, grimy little girl.
"She's disabled, has cerebral palsy, was born that way, and she's mentally challenged," Barbara said.
Tyler felt a surge of anger. Poor sister. Not only had she lost her health due to her mother's lifestyle, but she also lived in such inhumane conditions. He had to save her. He couldn't leave his sister in this horrible place. "I'm taking her with me," Tyler declared, looking sternly at his mother.
"That's none of your business. Give me the girl,"
Barbara demanded, approaching him. "Why? She needs care, treatment, activities, and you don't do any of that. She'll perish with you."
"Get out of here," Barbara said. "Want to help her? Give me money. I'll buy her medicine, sweets, but she'll live with me."
"Why?" Tyler repeated his question. "The benefits for her are good, as for a disabled child." A voice said from the doorway. Tyler turned and saw the neighbour who had advised him to enter the yard.
"Get out of here!"
Barbara was clearly losing her temper. "My name is Mrs. Scott, and I thought you were really from social services, or the guardianship authority, the woman said to Tyler. I thought they had finally reacted to our report. It's none of your business. Get out of here, all of you. I'll call Jack. You'll all be sorry, Barbara threatened. Don't threaten us with your bully, the neighbour advised, and added, looking at Tyler, Let's go. But what about her? How can we leave her? The young man looked helplessly at his little sister. It's okay. She's lived here for 9 years. She can wait a little longer. I'll help you. We need to act differently here, the woman said. 9 years? Gwen looked much younger. Tyler sat her down in a chair and knelt in front of her so that their eyes were at the same level. Mrs. Scott and Barbara were arguing, but Tyler wasn't paying attention to their words. Gwen, listen to me. I'm your big brother, and I'm going to take you away from here. Do you want to live somewhere else? Tyler asked. Yes, the little girl smiled and added, It's bad here. I'm scared. I'll take you away as soon as possible. Tyler stroked the little girl's tangled hair. His heart ached at the thought of having to leave her with her mother for even a little while longer, but there was no other way. Later, Tyler and the compassionate Mrs. Scott went straight to the city and managed to get a meeting with the head of the guardianship and trusteeship department. If you don't act now, we'll go to the TV stations, Mrs. Scott threatened. It's such a joy. The girl's brother has been found. Such a good, positive young man. He'll raise Gwen, and they'll ruin her there. We'll look into it, promised the woman in stylish glasses, making notes in her thick planner. Mrs. Scott's calculation turned out to be only half correct. Gwen was, of course, taken away from her mother. Barbara was stripped of her parental rights. But Tyler could not obtain guardianship over his sister. He was too young, his official income was insufficient, and he was single and alone. The commission considered that the young man would not be able to cope with raising a child, especially a disabled one, who required intensive treatment and rehabilitation. Thus, Gwen ended up in a house for children with special care, though conditions there were excellent. The place had spacious bedrooms, playrooms, good food, mountains of toys and books, developmental activities, medical care, and a friendly staff. Gwen blossomed. She always greeted her brother with a joyful smile, hugged him tightly, and shared her news. But the man still felt guilty for not being able to keep his promise. He hadn't taken his sister home. He was doing everything he could to make that moment come sooner. He found official work, even though it was hard for a student. He set up a separate bedroom for Gwen in his apartment, but no one was rushing to give a disabled girl to a single young man. The diagnosis of mental retardation was not confirmed in the orphanage. It turned out that it was all due to educational neglect. Gwen, due to her illness, did not communicate with her peers. Her mother did not engage with her, did not take her daughter to kindergarten, let alone clubs. But in the orphanage, Gwen quickly caught up. However, her cerebral palsy, of course, did not go away. Rehabilitation specialists managed to improve the situation slightly, but there was no talk of removing the disability. Tyler searched for the best specialists for his sister, even bought an expensive exercise machine for the orphanage, which was necessary for his sister's exercises. He spent every weekend at the orphanage. The brother and sister got to know each other better and grew closer. Now Tyler was grateful to his mother for giving birth to Gwen. He had a wonderful little sister. The girl did not feel abandoned. Her brother was always by her side. She liked the orphanage, and yet Tyler still dreamed of taking Gwen out of the institution as soon as possible. But to achieve this, he needed to get married. The young man even considered a fake marriage. He looked for a suitable woman
to formalise the relationship, take Gwen, and then get divorced. The wise Mrs. Scott dissuaded him from this risky step. You are young and naive. They will wrap you around their finger and take your property when you divorce. People can be like that. Wait, don't rush. Gwen is doing well there. Doctors are taking care of her, and she's getting better. And you don't have the time or experience. You'll meet a good girl, fall in love, get married, and then take the girl. And what if my wife doesn't like the fact that I have a sister who needs care? What then? Tyler asked. That will be a test of humanity. Then Tyler met Lorena and fell in love at first sight. He had never experienced anything like it before. When the young man found out that his feelings were mutual, he was overjoyed. Tyler cherished their budding relationship and was very tender with Lorena, so he did not dare to tell her about his sister. He was afraid that it would scare the girl away. Then there was the wedding, and Adam was born. Tyler felt joy and pride in having a family, but he had to lead a double life. He did not dare to tell Lorena about his sister. What if she feared the difficulties, and most importantly, Tyler wanted to protect Lorena from heavy thoughts and the need to burden her fragile shoulders with such responsibility. Tyler continued to visit Gwen every weekend. Of course, now he was a family man, and the meetings with his sister became less frequent and shorter, but Tyler tried not to miss these visits, as Gwen was waiting for him, and was very upset if her brother could not come. She missed him. I live between a rock and a hard place, and couldn't get the courage to tell you everything. And now you found out all this yourself, Tyler concluded, looking at his wife. You are so kind. Good, but completely silly, Lorena sighed. She gently patted Tyler on the cheek. I'm in shock from everything I've heard, but how could you think that I would be scared? I really want to meet your sister. Her place is in our family, and only there. She must be a wonderful child. She is sick, you understand? She is not just a child. Gwen is a disabled child. And I am a doctor, remember? I fully understand the difficulties and prospects. Let's meet her, right now. Lorena, I am so lucky with you. I am the lucky one with you, Lorena smiled. She truly believed that. Tyler was smart, kind, gentle, and caring. The woman valued these qualities in her husband, and the story with his sister convinced Lorena once again that she had not made a mistake with her husband. What is her size? Lorena asked suddenly. Clothing size. My dad's birthday is coming up soon. We will all go together, the four of us. Gwen should look like a real princess. Tyler smiled and hugged Lorena. His wife was right. He was indeed silly. How light and warm his heart felt now. And it could have been like this a long time ago.